just did a rant about how we have actually passed a major climate change tipping point that we can't walk back from. We can't stop it. This is coming now. It is unstoppable. This first step of it, which has to do with, the destruction of major cities in the United States and all around the world. You can check this out over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, or for people who support us on YouTube as well, you can see this. Get over to patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN to check this out. We're talking about how prior to a couple of years ago, and this is how, tipping points, you can only see them in the rearview mirror. Prior to a couple of years ago, in the winter, the Arctic and Greenland, the Antarctic and Greenland would recover some of their ice. Now they're not even doing that. It's just pausing. The melting is just pausing. That's that tipping point. And the consequences of this are going to be terrible. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Nuking the Moon and Other Intelligence Schemes and Military Plots Left on the Drawing Board. It's by Vince Houghton. This is from the introduction. This is a book about desperation. That word has been so overused and misused that it's lost much of its impact. Too many stories about some local sports team desperate for a win or some housewives desperate for whatever that show was about. These pretenders have trivialized a word designed to be used only in the most extraordinary of circumstances. It should be a powerful word reserved for the urgent and overwhelming feeling that one's life is at risk. It's the only truly existential, it's for the truly existential threats, another misused word, to one's country, one's family, one's friends, or one's livelihood. To feel desperate is to believe there are no good options, that everything that has been tried or could be tried is destined for failure. Desperation leads us to consider ideas that would have been unfathomable under normal circumstances, because desperate people make desperate decisions. This is also a book about innovation. Creative thinking about how things work and the possibilities of how things could work has been the catalyst for the astonishingly dynamic technological transformation of the past 100 years. From the advent of lighter-than-air flight to hypersonic aircraft, from bolt-action rifles to electromagnetic railguns, from ENIAC to quantum computing, from one poor freezing soldier in a trench listening to intercepted wireless messages to the NSA's supercomputers collecting the metadata of billions, brilliant people with innovative ideas continue to shape our world and do it exponentially faster than the generations that came before. But when innovation and desperation meet, trouble will usually follow. If necessity is the mother of invention, desperation is the drunk uncle. The guy who only calls twice a year at 3 a.m. on your birthday with the greatest idea anyone has ever had. No matter how hard you argue against the logic of his narrative, no matter how many flaws you find in his reasoning, he's resolute. This will work. It has to. He's a desperate man. Every so often, we're surprised when one of these ideas actually pans out. The U-2 and SR-71 spy planes, some of the most innovative aircraft ever designed, were the result of American desperation to see inside the Soviet Union. Nuclear power, computers, the internet, modern textiles, personal encryption, even the process of how some of our food is grown, were born out of the nation's desperate fear to keep pace with an imposing rival. Much of that history has been written before. Countless books have been published about the remarkable and successful technology developed over the last century by governments for national security needs. This is not one of them. Most history books are full of stories that happened. This is a history book full of stories behind things that didn't happen. Here we'll take an expansive look at projects, missions, operations, and technology that were seriously considered, but didn't make the grade. Some were ultimately deemed too risky, expensive, dangerous, ahead of their time, or even certifiably insane. Others were canceled mostly because they were overtaken by events. The atomic bomb worked, the war ended, the plans were captured, other technology superseded. Generally, history books use events of the past to make powerful arguments about historical actors' motivations, personalities, and states of mind, and rightfully so. This is part of what history books are supposed to do. But I contend that the evaluation of historical events is not enough. It can be just as important to investigate policies, decisions, and technologies that were considered at the highest levels, but then nixed for a variety of reasons. The intent of historical actors can be, and I argue is, far more instructive and illuminating than focusing entirely on the outcome of their policies. Outcome history is the traditional way of viewing historical events, but it leaves much to be desired. It has severe limitations, primarily because its lessons are predicated on things that can't be accurately quantified. Fate, luck, misfortune, whatever you want to call it. If the D-Day invasion of Normandy had failed because of a freak weather system, or a lucky shot from a German soldier that took out a key American leader on the beach, or any number of other misfortunate scenarios, would we think any less of Eisenhower's plan? Using outcome-based history, the answer is yes. And therein lies the problem. Intent can be a very powerful tool for historians. So leave your historical hindsight at the door. Ignore the fact that these policies, technologies, programs, and missions were scrapped before they became real. To get the most out of this book, you should take the advice of Master Yoda. You must unlearn what you have learned. The outcomes of the programs are inconsequential to the overall message of the narrative. Outcome really doesn't matter here at all. That's why this book scorns the counterfactual, the game of what if, vilifies it, mocks it mercilessly. The counterfactual is our enemy. We will not what if ourselves until we are blue in our faces trying to rewrite history into a hodgepodge of ahistorical nonsense. Deep breath. I might have taken that a little too far. Counterfactuals can be a lot of fun when you're hanging out with your friends and family debating the what-ifs of the Kennedy assassination, or the Civil War, the Protestant Reformation, or the Star Wars prequels, or the 1986 World Series. I forgive you, Bill Buckner, mostly. I'd be happy to join you all one day for a vigorous debate on historical counterfactuals, perhaps over your favorite adult beverage or bottle of Yoo-hoo, but they have no place here. Instead, all of these stories should have you saying, what were they thinking? The best way to approach this book is with an open mind toward the decision makers and how they were approaching the problems facing them. In almost every case, those in power were desperate to do something, anything, to combat their adversaries. Thus, what were they thinking is exactly correct, except I hope you'll be willing to truly embrace the question and not just see it as the dismissive aside or a hasty pejorative. Nuking.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And top of the Monday morning to you, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. There's a lot going on in the news. The shutdown may be back into force. We've got a discussion of the Electoral College. 400 richest Americans now own more than basically the majority of the rest of us. The insect collapse is happening. It is the 41st anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. A lot going on. And down south of us in Venezuela, excuse me, there's some serious stuff going on. And a guy who used to do a lot of reporting on this is Greg Palast, our old buddy, and the investigative journalist. He's reported for everybody from Rolling Stone and the BBC to well, pretty much every place. GregPalast.com. You can find all his stuff. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, and coming in from somewhere in the bowels of Europe. Greg Palast, welcome back to the program.
Okay, well, you can see by the Alps and the clock behind me that I'm in Switzerland, and with a new hat, so I'm kind of undercover.
Aha! Yes.
Yes.
It looks great.
So, but the issue today really is Venezuela.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you've given me this opportunity. You know, I covered Venezuela for the BBC, for Rolling Stone, and for The Guardian. And I know the president, I know the opposition, too. And what's going on here, which is not covered by the mainstream media, is a coup d'etat engineered by Donald Trump. Of course, he's not much of an engineer. The actual driver of that train is John Bolton, his neocon retread national security advisor. And basically, you've got a guy named Juan Guaido who has literally pronounced himself president, and Donald Trump has repronounced him president. He made that pronouncement, by the way, right after a phone call from Donald Trump saying, if you announce yourself as president, we know this, if you announce yourself as president, I'll recognize you as the president of a country where you've never even run for office. By the way, they're not claiming that the current government, which is a Chavista, that is Hugo Chavez's chosen successor, who won the last election, very close election. No one claimed he stole it. Carter Center or others. And this guy, Juan Guaido, a nice white guy who went to George Washington University, speaks English wonderfully. Our president, Mr. Trump, has literally declared he's president, and he's never run for anything. And if you really want to know what's behind this, I know that, Nate, if you could put up on the screen, let me show you a couple pictures that really explain it all. There are members of Congress who back this guy, Juan Guaido, the self-proclaimed, Trump-proclaimed president. And if you look at those Congress people, and the people on radio are just going to have to take our word for it. You know, you do trust Tom, and I hope you trust me. Basically, the congressional delegation that backs Juan Guaido, Trump's choice, is whiter than a Republican country club gathering. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the people that back Maduro, that is the people that are backing Hugo Chavez, the late Hugo Chavez's party, that's completely dark-skinned Congress people.
Yeah, and this, by the way, these are not just backers, as in, people who show up at a Trump rally kind of thing. This is literally the entire, all the members of Guaido's party in Congress are light-skinned, are European ancestry, and virtually all of them. And virtually all of the backers of Maduro are dark-skinned. They're either he said he's, I guess this is the Spanish language. He said he's part Negro, part Indio.
Yeah, Negro Indio is a term that Hugo Chavez used for me, meaning, by the way, not just meaning his heritage, that he's mestizo from black and Indian heritage, but that he looks black and he has Indian features. Right. And what we have here is basically a white supremacist coup d'etat. Now I know that this is Trump's dream for the United States. And what's amazing to me, Tom, is that the liberals in America, the Democratic Party leaders in America, when they look at I was at the Macon, Georgia Trump rally, and when they see the white supremacists yelling white supremacist nasty slogans, and they see that scary white white crowd that's trying to make sure that black people have no. In Georgia, we're trying to stop a black woman from becoming governor. They denounce that. They denounce those crowds. Yet in Venezuela, they're literally backing this minority white coup d'etat.
But Greg, or no, I shouldn't say but. I mean, let's widen the frame a little bit. I've worked in Colombia. I've worked in Peru. I've worked in Mexico. I have been to Venezuela. In fact, Louise and I were there the day of the first military coup.
I remember.
But I've actually worked in a number of those countries, and one of the things that I noticed when I was down there was, and most of this was back in the 80s, but still, was that the power structure is very, very white. I mean, you even saw this, look at the last president of Mexico, Vicente Fox. He looks like he just stepped out of an ad for Spain. And the poverty, the poor people are almost always, indigenous people, the ancestors of indigenous people, or indigenous people who have interbred. I guess is the word. I don't know how to say it politely.
Is how
over the years with slaves, and enslaved people, and there's still, and also you've got, the direct descendants of enslaved people. But and so the reality is that up until Hugo Chavez was elected president in Venezuela, I don't think that there was a person who was a person of color who was ever the leader of Venezuela, was there?
Right. He was the Obama of Venezuela after 400 years of white rule. But in this case, remember, it's a white minority rule.
Right.
And that was broken by Chavez and now his successor, Maduro, and the white people don't like it. Now, the truth is that Donald Trump didn't decide on Guaido because he wants to bring his Make America White Again program to Venezuela. It's something underneath those white people and under those brown people, which is the world's largest reserve of oil. That is 4 times the reserve of Saudi Arabia. And John Bolton, Trump's NSA chief, actually went on Fox News and said, the reason we are there, our number one concern, he actually said this on Fox News, is the oil. We've been talking to American oil companies. They are ready to take over Venezuela's oil. I kid you not. They're not even covering it up.
Right. No, I believe it's the Koch Industries that owns the refinery on the Gulf Coast that is the only refinery that's capable of refining this heavy crude that comes out of Venezuela. And now that that same refinery can also refine the heavy crap that comes down from Canada in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which is why they built the pipeline to that refinery. And there was a lot of people assuming that therefore they wouldn't need Venezuela's oil anymore.
Well, what was happening is that the Koch brothers were literally the captive customers. The number one customer of Venezuela was Koch Industries. Over half their oil went to Koch Industries and related companies. And so what happened is Venezuela was basically really charging the Koch brothers through the nose. So now, while they've been charging, the money's been collected by the American subsidiary of the Venezuelan state oil company called Citgo. You see those Citgo gas stations. Donald Trump has effectively taken over and seized Citgo and kept all the money. Because when the Kochs pay, they don't pay to Venezuela, even though it's Venezuela's oil, the people's oil. It's paid to basically the U.S. Treasury, or being held by the U.S. Treasury.
Paid to Citgo, and it's being seized by the U.S. Treasury. Yeah, I get it.
And it's just pretty funny because, we keep talking about, this terrible socialist who seized the oil company. Well, that's just what Trump has done.
Yeah, there you go. Greg, we only have about 2.5 minutes before we're going to hit a hard break that I can't do anything about, and I want to pursue this a little farther. The reality down in Venezuela right now is that they've got something like 100,000% inflation. It's just devastating everybody. And it appears, I've read a couple of pieces about this in the financial media, particularly the Financial Times, that the main thing, typically these kinds of hyperinflation happen when a vital or a critical commodity is not available, and so that price explodes and it drags everything else with it. We saw this in a small way in the United States after the Arab oil embargo, and apparently that vital commodity is U.S. dollars. That Venezuela had borrowed U.S. dollars had borrowed in things denominated in U.S. dollars very heavily, and now they can't pay that back, and that's what's killing their currency. To what extent is that the fault of the Chavez and Maduro government? To what extent do they own the dysfunction of their own economy?
I would say, I know Maduro, the president, I think he's over his head, no question, and I think he didn't realize what the United States could do to him, because here's what's happening. The entire economy of Venezuela is based on selling oil to the United States. That's the entire economy of Venezuela, okay, with some oil to China and Russia.
Right, and Cuba.
So now the United States is literally withholding all the money that's owed for that oil. Plus, there's an embargo. It's an act of war. In fact, the United Nations rapporteur has said this siege is like a medieval siege. It's an act of war. And the UN rapporteurs who was sent there said, this is causing starvation. There's no medicine because we are embargoing.
Yeah, 10% of the population has fled the country.
Yeah, and because they can't eat.
Right.
They have to get out. If you want to eat, if you want to survive, you got to go.
And now you got Marco Rubio and Donald Trump with this aid caravan via Colombia that's on their border that Maduro won't let into the country, which is, I think, politically he's shooting himself in the foot here.
Well, there's no question. They showed up with some food with American flags on it for 5,000 families for 3 weeks, okay? Right. There are 15 million people who are hungry. About half of the people are facing starvation. Millions of people.
And if we just lifted the embargo, they could get fed.
If you lifted the embargo and you gave them their money, but by the way, you know where the money's going? The number one creditors are Goldman Sachs and Apollo Capital, which is Mr. Black's
right, one of the hedge fund billionaires,
venture fund, and so the money's going to Goldman Sachs, and it's being held by Mnuchin, our Treasury Secretary, which he says he'll only give to the opposition, this white guy who proclaimed himself, and Trump will proclaim president. So they'll give him money if the Venezuelans make him president. It's literally, we're going to starve you unless you our white guy.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Greg Palast, investigative journalist, author, filmmaker. His most recent, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. GregPalast.com is the website. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T. Greg, thank you.
You're very welcome, Tom.
And thank you for staying up late there in Switzerland to do this with us. It is truly appreciated. We will be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We're going to talk about inequality, too. What's the most effective way for Americans to start clawing back some of the stolen money since the Reaganistas? And welcome back. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. Hey, Omar, what's on your mind today?
Tom, thank you so much for taking my call. You know,
Sure.
the key issue in military side is on. It's who's gonna prevail, and that's the key thing. But what I wanted to call about, Tom, is that, you know, for the 2020 presidential election, is that I'm a little bit concerned that I'm already seeing a lot of sparks of division, you know, in the Democratic Party, and it's really concerning. And the second thing is, I just think we have too many people running and people not taking this presidential race for 2020 seriously. I mean, you got everybody who just wake up morning and say, I want to run for president. This is an issue that we need to start working on now.
This is going to get winnowed down, Omar, over the next 3 or 4 months. You're going to see some people who just don't catch traction, and others who do. You know, we'll see.
Yeah, and this is just not about 2020 for the president. It's also about the Senate. So
Yeah.
I just think we have to take this issue very seriously.
It's also about the House. Every single member of the House is up for re-election.
Exactly.
It's
yes.
nothing to
Thank you so much.
take for granted. I mean, just because we have the House right now doesn't mean that we'll continue to have the House, you know, in
You got
a
it.
year and a half.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good talking to you, Omar. Thank you very much for the call. You know, there is, I mean, I think it really and truly is fascinating. Some of the other things that I wanted to share with you in the news, an interesting piece on Kamala Harris, or Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was asked on a program, what do you think about pot legalization? And she said, half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me? I love it. You know, what a great response. She's really moving forward. Amy Klobuchar announced her candidacy in a snowstorm. Donald Trump tweeted about that, you know, intending to make fun of her, which, you know, he said, well, it happened again. Amy Klobuchar announced she is running for president, talking proudly about fighting global warming while standing in a virtual blizzard of snow, ice, and freezing temperatures. Bad timing. By the end of her speech, she looked like a snow woman. Right. Well, you know, this, again, here you have the President of the United States arguing to millions of Americans that because it's cold outside, the planet isn't being damaged by the greenhouse gases that are being emitted by the guys who fund his campaign and the other Republicans' campaigns. You know, just lying through his teeth. So Amy Klobuchar responds, she says, science is on my side, Donald. Looking forward to debating you about climate change and many other issues, and I wonder how your hair would fare in a blizzard. Right. And then she says, everyone else can join my team and contribute at amyklobuchar.com. Nice trolling of Donald Trump, you know, and very nice trolling. Which raises an interesting question. Now we've got Amy Klobuchar in the race. We've got Kamala Harris. We've got Elizabeth Warren. We've got, you know, there's just a whole bunch of people who've pretty much jumped into the race recently. Who are you excited about? Who are you excited by? Are there Democratic presidential candidates that you would like to see really start rising through the ranks? Beto O'Rourke. Who is it? Who are these people that you would like to see? Give us a call, 202-808-9925. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. it actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This hour of our program, by the way, brought to you by ex-chair Thom, THOM.com. So Amy Klobuchar rolled out her candidacy yesterday, and Donald Trump made fun of the fact that she was in a blizzard when she did it. He, of course, was unwilling to even, what was it, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier? There was a ceremony at Arlington that he was unwilling to participate in because there was a light mist and he didn't want to get his hair wet. Here's Amy Klobuchar in a blizzard, and Donald Trump wants to make fun of her? Really? But anyhow, we've got some new candidates on the Democratic side, and I'm wondering, who has you excited? Who has you concerned? Who do you think is like really going to bang the walls or the doors or whatever, really make something happen, versus, who might be a stalking horse? Who's just doing this to try to raise their brand versus who's actually seriously running for president? Who do you think has the best chance? In my opinion, we have some serious contenders. I think that Kamala Harris is a serious contender. I think that Sherrod Brown is a serious contender. We'll see with Cory Booker. We'll see with Amy Klobuchar. I think they're kind of second tier, but they could break out. They, something could happen. They could really go big. Beto O'Rourke is undeclared, but he's giving a speech tonight. Donald Trump is going down to El Paso, Texas, to lie to us all about, telling lies that people in El Paso know are lies, which is pretty amazing how brazen this guy is. But he's going to go down to El Paso tonight and lie to us about the wall, and so Beto O'Rourke is going to do his rally an hour after Trump's to set the record straight. This should become a tradition. Every time Trump gives a rally anywhere, particularly because the television networks love to carry all or part of his rallies, there should be a counterbalancing rally where we're saying, no, I don't think so, not so much. So, we had, there was another, I think it was Michael Bennet, a congressman from, I believe, Colorado, came out yesterday on, what was it, Face of the Nation or Meet the Press, whatever it was, and said, yes, I'm running, or I'm seriously thinking of running. We have Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman from Hawaii, who has come out and said that she's running. I mean, there's a bunch of these, right? A bunch of, in my opinion, good folks. I think we have a hell of a bench here. We've got a lot of good people running. And, if I didn't mention Elizabeth Warren, obviously Elizabeth Warren. Bernie Sanders has not yet declared whether he's going to run or not. Hillary Clinton, I think, has pretty much taken herself out of the race. I don't see any indications that she's even thinking about running. But, what's the state of the race in your mind? And who would you really like to see move forward? We'll pick up your calls after this. It's 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Elizabeth Warren talking about rigged politics. Amy Klobuchar talking about global warming. It's happening. Our book today is From Slave Ship to Supermax, Mass Incarceration, Prisoner Abuse, and the New Neo-Slave Model by Patrick Elliott Alexander. This is Chapter 1. Talking in George Jackson's Shadow is the title, if Beale Street could talk. Prison preoccupied the literary imagination of James Baldwin. Yet his biographer, David Leeming, is one of the few to notice that prisons and prisoners were a significant part of Baldwin's own personal experience. Even the most cursory glance at Baldwin's published works and interviews bear out Leeming's important observation. In his essay, Equal in Paris, 1955, Baldwin reveals that during his time in France, he was, quote, arrested as a receiver of stolen goods and spent 8 days in prison. While confined, Baldwin witnessed with great shock another incarcerated man's bleeding and wounding go unattended intentionally by prison staff. In his longer essay, No Name on the Street, 1972, Baldwin reflects on frequent prison visits that he made to his friend Tony Maynard, a black man who suffered violent treatment from guards after he was falsely accused with the murder of a white U.S. Marine. Baldwin's advocacy for black political prisoners in particular deeply informed his writings and public addresses throughout the 1970s and included actions such as aiding in the release of imprisoned Black Panther Party co-founders Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. In 1970, Baldwin was so outraged by the appearance of Angela Davis, the black revolutionary and advocate for political prisoners in handcuffs and mock mugshot posture on the cover of Newsweek magazine, that he published an open letter to the New York Review of Books in which he deemed her jailing a continuation of slavery and a foreshadowing of a radicalized epidemic of mass incarceration at one and at the same time. Quote, only a handful of the millions of people in this vast place are unaware that the fate intended for you, Sister Angela, and for the numberless prisoners in our concentration camps, for that is what they are, is a fate which is about to engulf them too, end quote. When Baldwin spoke out about racism in the criminal justice system in the Dick Cavett Show in 1973, he won widespread admiration among imprisoned black communities, receiving, quote, so many letters from them that he determined to arrange a Christmas version of his musical drama, The Hallelujah Chorus, that would tour American prisons. Finally, in 1982, Baldwin published a letter in which he insisted that artists and prisoners have more in common with one another than have servants of the state. Baldwin was a stranger neither to witnessing nor to writing about prisons and prisoner abuse. Yet Baldwin's oeuvre had not been examined extensively in the context of his engagements with the literature and life experiences of imprisoned men and women. This chapter focuses on Baldwin's understanding of prisoner abuse and police intimidation as interrelated, radicalized social control functions of the contemporary U.S. carceral state, and pays careful attention to how his historicizing of radicalized state violence in fiction is shaped by his admiring engagement with the writings of imprisoned intellectuals. Baldwin, I contend, alludes to the human chattel conditioning, disciplinary violence, and economic exploitation that typified the institution of slavery in his Black Liberation Movement era short stories and novels to situate his black working class characters' subjection to racial profiling, police brutality, wrongful incarceration, indefinite solitary confinement, prisoner abuse, and premature death in racialized historical context. Focusing mostly on Baldwin's novel If Beale Street Could Talk, 1974, this chapter explores how Baldwin, inspired by the narrative techniques of the imprisoned intellectual George Jackson, links a repressive logic of racial terror from the era of antebellum slavery with the state's practice of white supremacist social control into the contemporary criminal justice system. I argue that by incorporating Baldwin's conception of neo-slavery into the elusive framework for Beale Street, Baldwin elucidates the predictability, rather than the aberrant nature, of black men's hypercriminalization, incarceration, and brutalization by the state. Beale Street thus exemplifies well what I theorized in the introduction as a neo-abolitionist novel. With this work, Baldwin becomes the first canonical African-American writer to construct a conceptual model of the prison-industrial complex in fiction that privileges the narrative viewpoint of its captives while also making apparent slavery's vestiges in the contemporary U.S. criminal justice system. My point of departure for this chapter is Baldwin's career-length consideration of racial terror as a state-sanctioned social control function of both pre- and post-slavery American life, and the relationship of this instrumentalist terror to blacks' recurring encounters with state violence in the late 20th and 21st centuries. This contextualization establishes a broader framework within which my reading of criminalization and punishment in Beale Street might be understood. Baldwin's witnessing of the physical, psychological, and spiritual harm that the criminalized black body endures at the hands of the state shows up prominently in his nonfiction works as well. In his book-length essay, No Name in the Street, for instance, Baldwin's assessment of wounds that prison guards inflict on his former driver and bodyguard, Tony Maynard, a wrongfully incarcerated black man, is characteristically disturbing and damning. The book, From Slave Ship to Supermax.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. 34 minutes past the hour. Going to pick up your phone calls in just a second about the presidential race. But speaking of presidential races, Robert Sanders just tweeted something out that is like, this is great. I've got to share this with you. Back in 1980, Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter had a debate, a presidential debate. And in that debate, Jimmy Carter said something. He made a proposal. And Reagan famously, I mean, this is probably the only thing anybody remembers from that debate. Reagan famously said, "There you go again." You know what Reagan was saying, "There you go again" about? He was ridiculing Jimmy Carter for wanting to have Medicare for all. Let that sink in for a minute. Reagan saying, "There you go again," was ridiculing Jimmy Carter for wanting Medicare for all. Here is the clip. It's 49 seconds. Listen to this.
Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare. Now we have an opportunity to move toward national health insurance with an emphasis on the prevention of disease, an emphasis on outpatient care, not inpatient care, an emphasis on hospital cost containment to hold down the cost of hospital care for those who are ill, an emphasis on catastrophic health insurance, so that if a family is threatened with being wiped out economically because of a very high medical bill, then the insurance would help pay for it. These are the kind of elements of a national health insurance important to the American people. Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
Governor, there you go again.
There you go again. Right. It's shocking when you look back on it, you know. It really and truly is. David in Columbus, Ohio, listening on WGRN. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I really was impressed with, I guess her name is Tulsi Gabbard. She's from Hawaii.
Yes, Tulsi, yes.
Yeah, she's not getting press time like she could because she's opposed to a lot of things that are sort of sacred cows, like high defense spending, and she's opposed to this Venezuela intrusion, and I think she's also a veteran, so she's got credibility. And I think we need to pull together on this and not have disparate groups saying we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't. The Democrats need to speak with one strong voice, and one of the strong voices we should have is reducing that defense spending that's taking money away from important issues. I think she's doing that.
Yeah, she is.
She's doing that. I think Elizabeth Warren's doing that, but I think it's vague from the other candidates. So I'd like to see that strongly come out.
Yeah, I agree. And Tulsi Gabbard is a vet. She did see war, and she is now saying, you know, okay, it's time to get out of Syria, time to get out of the Middle East. Let's not go into Venezuela. She is one of the more outspoken and credible voices for non-intervention and for peace. So spot on. David, thank you for the call. Carrie in New Windsor, New York. Hey, Carrie, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. What's on your mind?
All right. I think you're just doing a great job. Just wanted to say that once again. I just wish that I remember during Women's History Month, speaking of all these women candidates running for president, last year you had said that you think that, you know, you agreed with me that maybe in general women make better decisions than men, and so more women in power would be a wonderful thing for every issue that everyone keeps fighting for all the time. It's like they're spinning their wheels maybe in some ways, but I don't see a woman becoming president until women get paid as much as men. So my question to you is, besides policy change, which is just moving a little too slow and is so backwards, I could tell you in New York, thing I just learned from attorney Michael Ratner, the current workplace policies for sexual harassment. What ways do you see women being able to get paid as much as men? We can just start there.
I suspect, Carrie, that if we look at the arc of the last 15 years or so, with regard to the national discussion about race, prior to Obama's candidacy and then presidency, it was basically something that wasn't discussed except in bumper sticker terms. Then President Obama became president, Barack Obama became president, and he initiated a few discussions about race that certainly dug a lot deeper than just the bumper sticker stuff. But I think perhaps most importantly, his candidacy activated the racists. Donald Trump came out with this whole birther thing. Actually, Jerome Corsi, was the first one to sell that. Trump picked it up, ran with it, and pulled all these racists behind him. And that was one of the major factors that led to Donald Trump becoming president, was, the racists. And now Trump is actively promoting racism, from, demonizing brown people south of the border to shutting down access to the United States from people coming from majority black countries, particularly Muslim countries in the Middle East and in Africa, and so on. And that then is producing a backlash, among progressive whites, I guess, for lack of, or not racist whites, and people of color across the country. And so what's happened is it looks like things are a lot worse, but I would argue that this is actually a really healthy process. The whole, the debate we're having around Northam, all this other stuff, that's all happening as a consequence, in large part, not entirely, part of it is just the normal arc of time and change, but in large part because of the first black man to be president of the United States. So my guess, Carrie, a long way of saying this, is that if a woman were elected president, that would essentially do the same thing. It would provide. First of all, you'd have a backlash. You'd have a bunch of men who are, talking about and treating her in the dismissive ways that men treat women. And secondly, I think that it would provoke a debate. Third, I think that there's a very good chance it would lead to the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, which we've been working on for 60 years now. It's one sentence, no discrimination, not based on gender. Based on sex, actually, is the word used in the thing, and I think that would be the biggest thing we could do. What do you think?
My jaw's to the floor.
Why?
That's what I think. That's amazing. I'm just totally blown away.
You think it's possible that having a woman as a president would produce that kind of forward motion in women's rights, just like having a black man as president has produced that kind of forward, at least conversation around awareness?
Oh, man, I really hope you're right.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
I do.
Okay,
I can't even begin to comprehend. As a woman, I can tell you, I just don't think that we're there yet.
Yeah. I had actually one of the top people in the California Democratic Party back during the primary in 2008, when it was Hillary versus Barack Obama, and we didn't know who was going to win. He was African American. He came on this program and he said, we've got to get behind Hillary Clinton, because America will not elect a black man president, particularly a black man whose middle name is Hussein. He said, it just ain't going to happen. Let's just get over it. Let's all get behind Hillary. And he wasn't a Hillary partisan, by the way. I mean, he was one of the top 3 people in the California Democratic Party, as I recall, or at least maybe in this particular county. And he was wrong. And I think that the people who say that a woman can't get elected president of the United States, I think that they're wrong too. Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And if her campaign had been just a little bit more strategic, if Robbie Mook had just said, hey, maybe you should campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, she would be president right now. I mean, and so in my mind, we've already elected a woman as president. But we haven't had an opportunity to have that kind of blowback that I was just talking about. So we'll see where it goes. Carrie, thank you for the call. Bibi in Seattle. Am I saying your name right? Or is it Beeb?
Yes. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. What's up?
I hope you're not snowed in down there.
No, it's turned into rain this morning. Louise and I walked for about 40 minutes this morning in the rain, which was kind of nice, actually. Haven't done that in a while when we walked into work.
That's good. Well, we can talk about Democrats being split up and blah, 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 but we don't have a choice. I think we already know. We've been down this road already. His name is Bernie Sanders. He's our candidate.
Well, Bernie only had one person to compete with 4 years ago, and that was Hillary Clinton. Do you think that he's going to stand up as well to this to the current batch? I mean, frankly, Hillary, in my mind, I mean, I ultimately campaigned for her once she won the nomination. I went all in. I think we all did.
We all had to as Democrats.
Yeah, of course. And Bernie asked us to, and Bernie actually was the person, just short of Tim Kaine, who did more campaign stops on behalf of Hillary Clinton than any other politician in America. But where I was going with that, Bibi, is that I still felt that Hillary Clinton was a very weak candidate. There was enormous baggage around her husband, some enormous baggage around some of her political past. Plus, she was unwilling to step out and be genuinely progressive. She was still, clinging to neoliberalism. All of those things really hurt her badly. I don't see that with many of these other Democratic candidates. I don't see that with Sherrod Brown. I only see a little tiny bit of that with Kamala Harris. I don't see that with certainly Elizabeth Warren at all. These are incredibly strong candidates. And I don't know that Bernie Sanders is the default candidate anymore, because he's up against some people who are, in my opinion, pretty much just as good as he is.
You can say that, and I'm not going to say that I disagree with you. But if we are to stick with our historical whatever as Democrats, just like Hillary Clinton got propped up last time as our only person, then Bernie Sanders should be the one who ran and was there, and he should be put back. I don't think he has to stand up, Tom. He's already stood up.
So your argument, Bibi, is basically that it's his turn.
Well,
he paid his dues 4 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've tried everything the corporatist Democrats have given us. Now it's time for the progressive Democrats to step forward like AOC and make this thing happen.
Yeah. Well, AOC is too young to run for president, but I get everything you're saying. Bibi, we'll see, and we'll find out what other people think about it. I suspect that Bernie is going to have a much more rigorous path to follow and much more competent competition than he had 4 years ago. But that doesn't mean he's not up to it. I mean, he's a hell of a campaigner, and he really understands politics.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Just for the record, by the way, in the past, 4 years ago, I endorsed Bernie first, and then, of course, Hillary. This year, I'm going to just stay in the background, and let's see what happens. And welcome back. Laura in Hazel Park, Michigan, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Laura, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Good afternoon. In regards to the primary and the candidates on the Democratic side running for president, we're going to thin the herd once we hit Super Tuesday. Because with Super Tuesday and California moving up, it's going to come down to money. It always comes down to money. It's unfortunate, but it does. To run ads in California for Super Tuesday is phenomenally expensive. And with the number of candidates that we currently have running in the Democratic primary, just right now, it's going to matter of who is going to be able to cover the entire span of California. And Kamala Harris has already won California statewide. So
right.
She's already ahead of everyone else. Now, I have no favorite. I'm like you. I like them all. I'm staying back, waiting to see who wins.
Me too.
And then I will vote in my primary, obviously, but I don't have a pick because it's a matter of we just need to win.
So, Laura, Super Tuesday is spring of next year, right? Isn't that like March of 2020 or 2020?
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is keep your powder dry till then, or let's just wait and see how it shakes out. I mean, with regard to the money thing too, small donations.
It's a matter of how much it costs to run ads in California.
Right.
There's already articles being written right now that the reality of it is starting to set in.
Right.
And if you're an unknown or someone who's not well-known nationally,
right.
It's going to come down to once you get to Super Tuesday, who is going to have the name recognition to even get noticed.
Right.
to win.
And to that end, Laura, Bernie Sanders has 22 million people on his mailing list, 22 million people who have donated money to him in the past. I believe that Elizabeth Warren has 770,000. If I'm doing this from memory, but I read it in the paper over the weekend, a little over 700,000. And I believe that Kamala Harris has something around 300,000. And nobody else is even close. Everybody else is, 100,000. Oh, it was Beto O'Rourke. I'm sorry. Beto O'Rourke has 700,000, and everybody else is 200,000 or 300,000 under, at that. So that's one of the metrics that I think that we're really going to have to pay attention to is how many small donors do you have?
The one thing I'm seeing too, and the thing that saddens me, is we're seeing a repeat of 2016, where the minute someone sees something on the internet that discredits someone based on an opinion or an opinion article, they're taking it as gospel. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, for a prime example, is immediately they're attacking her for being a strong, independent leader and a tough boss.
Right.
And it's like, so immediately, they come out with slanders against her because the misogyny is kicking.
Oh, that is so sexist. I mean, nobody ever accused Donald Trump of being, a bad guy because of his year fired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But no, that was my point. But thank you, and you have a great day. But I think that we're gonna have some strong candidates this year. Yeah,
I agree. Laura, thank you very much. And Laura, interjects a kind of a note of sober realism here. Money is a big variable too. So who can raise the money? Who's going to? I think it's going to be whoever captures the imagination of the American public. And I think both Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris are way ahead on that. But we'll see. Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America. Welcome back. Who do you think is going to be our next president? Who is going to be the Democratic candidate? Who can make it? Who can capture the imagination of the American electorate? Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, your thoughts?
Yes, Tom. The Democratic nominee will come from one of three candidates: Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, or Bernie Sanders.
Or Beto O'Rourke.
Else? What? No, Beto's not going to. He's not going to make it. Beto's more of a vice presidential candidate. As a matter of fact,
that makes sense.
I think the unbeatable ticket would be Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke as a vice presidential candidate. I don't think that anybody could beat that ticket. It would roll everybody over. Ideally, I like to see Elizabeth Warren, but that doggone Pocahontas thing is going to be a millstone around her neck. And
I don't think anybody cares, Mark. The Native Americans are fine with it. They're very proud that she was proud of her Native ancestry. It's an issue that plays exclusively for the pundit class, and screw the pundit class. But I think that in terms of, looking at this like, Nixon Johnson, Kennedy Johnson, where Jack Kennedy was from the Northeast, and so he needed somebody from the South to balance the ticket, so he picked up Lyndon Johnson. Kamala Harris is from California. It's a huge state. It's going to play a significant role in the election. And of course, Beto O'Rourke is from Texas. So you've got, a coastal elite and a southern Midwest, middle of the country person. Elizabeth Warren coming from the Northeast. I think she could easily pick up California too. I think your point of Go ahead.
I think that would be a great ticket myself.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I think either Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, or even Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke would be a pretty unbeatable ticket. Although I think I think it would be a good thing to have a person of color. Although we have had a black president, but it's not like, hey, we take turns and all that kind of thing. On the one hand, on the other hand, this whole thing of selecting a president by check marks, not necessarily the best way to do it. But anyhow, Mark, thank you for the call. That's an interesting one. Morris in Long Beach, listening to KPFK. Hey, Morris.
Hey, Professor, I was watching the the Grammys last night.
Mm-hmm.
I started crying. I started crying. Michelle Obama got up on it. I started crying. Michelle Obama would smoke every woman that's running for president today. And anytime I hear Camilla, let's make a deal, Harris, being our top candidate, it turns my stomach. Y'all don't know nothing about her like I do. But again, I saw the Grammys last night. You think the top woman is Camilla, let's make a deal, Harris? You better take a look at Michelle Obama. She's got character and the love of everybody. The people was applauding so long, I didn't think they was going to stop. Now, Camilla, let's make a deal, Harris can get an audience like that if she pay him. But Michelle Obama, she smoked all them women.
So your objection to Kamala Harris is what, Morris?
My objection to Kamala, let's make a deal, Harris, is she is a corporatist. And I believe that her marriage has something to do with her opinion with respect to the Palestinians. People should remember that Jesus Christ was a Palestinian, not a Western European Israeli. You got it? And I'm with this, the Democratic Congressman, Omar, whatever way you pronounce her name, that says that AIPAC shouldn't get any money. They shouldn't get any money. They're a terrorist group. They're a cult. You see, we need to come out with the real deal holy and start reading and stop going with these corporate narratives. If Camilla, let's make a deal, Harris is our best candidate we got, we're in trouble, Professor, straight up.
Yeah.
And people should have got
okay, Morris, I got it. Thank you. We're dancing awful close to anti-Semitism here. Anyhow, John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's about the issues. I kind of agree with your last caller in that we need to get away from these corporatist, middle-of-the-road, namby-pamby, not very interesting candidates.
You think Kamala Harris is one of those people, John?
Well, Kamala Harris isn't, but Amy Klobuchar is. I can tell you that. And I'm chomping at the bit for a progressive candidate who sticks to the issues. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Beto O'Rourke, whoever. I'm all.
Beto was not a progressive when he was in Congress. He was a member of the New Dems. Right. He was a member of the neo-libertarian caucus, not the progressive caucus.
Right. So I'm chomping at the bit for these issues, not for the personality. I want to have Medicare for all. I want a Green New Deal. And why not? It makes sense. I mean, if you listen to yourself and everybody else, they make a lot of sense, unlike the twisted kind of thing that they have to do to make neoliberalism continue to stick.
I think unless we get Joe Biden, I think pretty much whoever the Democratic candidate is probably going to have to adopt those kinds of policies, John, don't you think?
I hope so. I mean, I've been waiting 40 years for that. I didn't even support I'm a true progressive. I come from a progressive family. I supported Mo Udall for president over the peanut farmer. I'm waiting. I'm about your age almost, 5 years younger, and I'm waiting. I mean, I'll be there at 12-hour shifts, trying to get whoever the right person is to be elected. Let the process be democratic at the convention level, and let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, hey, I'm with you. I'm excited about it. And you heard my playing that clip of Jimmy Carter in 1980 in the debate with Ronald Reagan, where he said, we need Medicare for all, and Reagan was like, well, there you go again. I don't think there you go again is going to work for the Republicans this time. John, thank you. We'll be back. We're going to continue this conversation, and also I want to get into how do we fight against inequality in our society. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
just did a rant about how we have actually passed a major climate change tipping point that we can't walk back from. We can't stop it. This is coming now. It is unstoppable. This first step of it, which has to do with, the destruction of major cities in the United States and all around the world. You can check this out over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, or for people who support us on YouTube as well, you can see this. Get over to patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN to check this out. We're talking about how prior to a couple of years ago, and this is how, tipping points, you can only see them in the rearview mirror. Prior to a couple of years ago, in the winter, the Antarctic and Greenland would recover some of their ice. Now they're not even doing that. It's just pausing. The melting is just pausing. That's that tipping point. And the consequences of this are going to be terrible. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. For our book club today, we're reading from a book that's long out of print, The History of World War II, Armed Services Memorial Edition. It's written by Francis Trevelyan Miller and the U.S. military, and with the Board of Historical and Military Authorities by Universal Book and Bible House in 1945. And this is from the chapter, The Phenomenon of Hitler. It starts out, his father was Alois Schicklgruber, the illegitimate child of a peasant girl who bore his mother's name until he was 40. Alois started out as a shoemaker's apprentice. Conscripted into the army, he rose to the rank of sergeant. That was so much above a mere cobbler, he stayed with the army for 15 years. After his discharge, he received a so-called certificate appointment that made him a minor customs official with the Imperial Civil Service. He had worked up to what seemed to him high above the scorned class of common people, the peasants, and the poor little working men. That trait had its influence on his son, Adolf. Alois Schicklgruber married 3 times. His first wife, 14 years older than he, divorced him. While his first marriage was still valid, another girl, Franziska Matzelsberger, bore him a son, Alois. Schicklgruber married her after his divorced wife died. 2 months after their marriage, she bore him a daughter, Angela. 1 year later, his second wife died. 10 months thereafter, he married Clara Polzel, who was his junior by 23 years. He was 47 then and had in the meantime changed his name to obtain a legacy to Hitler. From his third marriage sprang 5 children, of whom 3 died in infancy. The 2 surviving were Adolf and Paula. Adolf Hitler's half-brother, Alois, ran away from home, complaining about cruel treatment by his father. He worked as a waiter in England, married an Irish girl, treated her cruelly, and begot a son, William Patrick Hitler. After Adolf came to power, Alois returned to Germany, leaving wife and son behind, and became a prosperous innkeeper. Adolf's half-sister, Angela, also followed him to Germany from Austria to care for his households in Munich and Berchtesgaden. She was the mother of unhappy Gelrubal, the girl who is said to have committed suicide after becoming enamored of her uncle Adolf. His sister Paula, considered a queer person, lived a troublesome life in Vienna and became an ardent Nazi. William Patrick Hitler broke away from the Hitler clan and came with his mother to the United States to fight against the world scourge of Nazism. This young man, imbued with the spirit of freedom inherited from his liberty-loving Irish mother, joined the United States Navy. The historians of this volume held confidential talks with Hitler's nephews, some of which can be related here. He placed before us official documents which threw light on the background of Adolf Hitler. He told us about the years when he lived with his uncle at Berchtesgaden, the conduct and habits of the Führer, how in his mountain retreat, the most strongly fortified in the world, Hitler planned and plotted world conquest. The nephew related to us the secrets of the mysterious Rudolf Hess and the Ernst Putzi Hofstadtgegel, who fled to England, the latter being held prisoner in Canada and later coming to the United States. Letters were submitted to document the facts. These are books in themselves, which undoubtedly will be revealed in future years. It is sufficient to state here that young Patrick Hitler fled from Berchtesgaden when he became convinced that his uncle, Adolf, was suffering from delusions of grandeur and a messianic complex which endangered his own nephew's life as well as Germany and the whole world. Having disposed of 1,000 of his intimates, Adolf Hitler's own family was not safe from attack. He would break into his nephew's room in the midnight hours to rant about how he would conquer the world. As a child, he was as difficult as Alois, his father. Father Alois was a tyrannical egoist with a mania for cruelty. Young Adolf liked to rage in rabid oratories, audience or no audience. His father called him daffy and lazy. He wanted his son to become an important personage like himself. But 11-year-old Adolf revolted against going to school and exposing himself to the heavy task of book learning. He hated his teachers. He hated his schoolmates. Faced by the odious realities of life as they were fearfully represented to him by a father with a big stick and an inclination for alcohol, Adolf wanted only to escape. He was 13 at the time of his father's death and 19 when his mother died. Of the 6 years between those two events, little is known about the boy's doings, except that he prevailed upon his mother to take him out of the hated secondary school, and that she encouraged him in his hobby of making drawings until his ego became inflated to the point that he believed himself a genius. He lived on his mother's pension until her death. With his mother and her income gone, the escapist days were over. He had to face life. A misfit, uneducated, arrogant, undeveloped in mind, stubborn and quarrelsome, without any moral concepts. Such was young Adolf Hitler when he entered Vienna in the beginning of 1909. Here his ego was deflated for the first time. He could not even pass his entrance exams to the Academy of Arts. His drawings were considered crude imitations, counterfeits. When a jury at the Academy of Munich refused a painting he submitted for exhibition, he stormed back to inquire who composed the jury. He learned that among them was a Jew who ranked as one of the outstanding masters of German art. At once, he blamed the jury's decision to exclude his work upon this Jew, declaring, "They shall pay for this." Precipitated from vainglory, Hitler woke to find himself an obscure outcast. In his despair, he stooped so low in his own estimation as to take up work as an unskilled laborer. To carry mortar on scaffolding was far beneath his dignity. He had not yet conceived the idea that Providence had chose him to be the leader of the master race, the history of World War II.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We've been talking in the previous hour. We had Greg Palast on to open the show, and he's in Switzerland right now. And he was talking about what's going on in Venezuela, and he had a couple of amazing pictures. A photograph of Maduro, the president of Venezuela, who was just reelected, and a photo of Guaido, the guy who is the Speaker of the House, who Donald Trump has decided is president. He had a phone call with Donald Trump, and then immediately thereafter, both he and Trump said, "This guy's the president." And Guaido is white. I mean, white, like, Caucasian, European white. And so is pretty much, there's a picture that Greg has of a couple hundred members of Congress, of the Congress or Parliament or whatever it's called in Venezuela, who are members of his party, and they're all white. And most of them men. On the other hand, when you look at Maduro's party, when you look at that class photo of his political party, they're all black or Native American, South American Native American. Indio is how they refer to themselves down there, the Indians. And Greg's point was this is about race more than absolutely anything else, which is pretty breathtaking. And then I raised the question, okay, who do you think that, is going to be the best candidate for the Democratic Party in 2020? Who do you like? There's a couple of different questions here that we can get into. Who do you like? Who would you vote for, whether you like them or not? Who do you think has the best chance of winning, whether you like them or not? Who do you think has the best chance of capturing the imagination of the people? Who do you think has the best chance of being destroyed by the media because they don't like his or her agenda? A lot of different ways to look at this and approach this. So I encourage you to, give us a shout and let us know about that. The lines are all busy right now. Everybody's on hold wanting to weigh in, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But, as we go through the program today, we'll keep this as an open question throughout the next hour and a half. A new study, apropos of all this, by the way, this is a big issue that whoever is our president is going to have to deal with, and going to have to deal with fast, because this not only is corrosive. This not only is a cancer in the American body politic and the American economy, and a social cancer as well, but it also massive levels of inequality where the rich get just wildly richer than the average working person. And as a result of the rich sucking all this money out of the economy, the middle class gets wiped out. This is exactly what happened in 1929. So not only is there a moral dilemma and a political dilemma and all that, but there's an economic dilemma coming as well if history repeats itself and we get another 1929 style crash, because once again, the rich people have taken all the money. New study shows that the richest 400 Americans now earn more wealth than the bottom 60% of us, over 150 million Americans. This is wealth in the order of the European kings of the 18th century, right? This is Louis XVI. It's worse, actually, right now than it was in the 1920s, and that led right to the Great Crash. And this massive transfer of wealth from working people to the very rich was the clear and explicit result of Reaganism and neoliberal policies that have not only left half Americans unable to deal with even a $400 expense and destroyed upward mobility for our kids. They're not doing better than their parents did, first generation ever. But it's also producing a whole spectrum of social ills. This is, we talked with Kate Pickett about this last week on this program, or maybe the week before. They've got this new book about, inequality, and it is destroying. Not only has it destroyed upward mobility, but it's leading to things like divorce, teen pregnancies, suicide, drug addiction, crime. We need to undo Reaganism's tax cuts, the ones that Ronald Reagan did, the ones that George W. Bush did, and the ones that Donald Trump did. Those three presidents' tax cuts, just their tax cuts, account for over $20 trillion missing from our economy, or missing from our federal treasuries. Over $20 trillion. Virtually all of the national debt can be accounted for by the tax cuts of three Republican presidents, Reagan, Bush, and Trump. And then you add to that the $5 trillion that we spent on wars in the Middle East that George W. Bush lied us into. And Trump is saying it's $7 trillion. I'll go with the government figures, $5.5 trillion. It doesn't matter. You add the $5 trillion from the unnecessary war that Bush and Cheney lied us into, and Cheney said, you don't have to put it on the budget. It's going to pay for itself with the oil that we steal. Don't worry. Everything's going to be good. Dick Cheney lied through his teeth, too, as he does. Seems to be the Cheney thing. And what you see is that these three presidents, these three illegitimate presidents, Ronald Reagan cut a deal with the Iranians to get into office. And by the way, I've got a piece up on Common Dreams, it was on Alternate, it might have rolled off, and now it's on Slate, or Salon rather, it just went up on Salon. It's titled, "The Founders Created the Electoral College to Prevent a Foreign Influence Candidate from Winning." And I'm quoting, this is from Alexander Hamilton from Federalist 68. He says, the most deadly adversaries of America will probably make their approaches to seizing control of the United States from more than one quarter, chiefly from the desire in foreign powers to gain an important ascendant in our councils. So who would that important ascendant be? In other words, is a foreign power going to try and get a senator into office? Hamilton writes, how could they better gratify this than by raising a creature of their own to the chief magistracy, the presidency of the Union? So Hamilton was like, okay, the worst thing that can happen to us is if we end up with a president who's actually more interested in working on behalf of a foreign power than working on behalf of the United States. And in Federalist 68, he writes, the framers of the Constitution, we have guarded against all danger of this sort with the most provident and judicious attention. So how are they going to do this? They came up with the Electoral College, which would be made up, this is quoting Hamilton again, of persons selected for the temporary and sole purpose of making the appointment. It would be illegal for a senator or House member to become one because, as Hamilton wrote, quote, they have excluded from eligibility to this trust all those who, from situation, might be suspected of having too great a devotion to the president in office. No senator, representative, or other person holding a place of trust or profit under the United States can be a member of the electors. This, Hamilton says, is going to eliminate any sinister bias. He says this process of election by the Electoral College affords a moral certainty that the office of president will never fall to the lot of any man who is not in an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications. I mean, he was so proud of himself, Alexander Hamilton. He says, talents for low intrigue and the little arts of popularity may alone suffice to elevate a man to the first honors of a single state. In other words, you know, a hustler can become a governor, but nobody's going to get past the Electoral College, right? He says, but it will require other talents and a different kind of merit to establish him in the esteem and confidence of the men in the Electoral College who will select him as president of the whole Union. He wrote, it would not be too strong to say that there will be a constant probability of seeing that station, the presidency, filled by characters preeminent for ability and virtue because of the Electoral College. Well, it didn't keep Trump out. It's time to nuke it. And also, you know, here we have this problem of just absolutely massive wealth taking over America. What do we do about that? Should we go with Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax? Should we go with I think, I'm not sure if it was Kamala Harris or who else it was who was proposing an income, you know, basically repealing the Reagan taxes. Obviously, Ocasio-Cortez, you know, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has proposed a 70% income tax on income over $10 million. That's kind of a no-brainer. So there's a lot of possibilities here. So your calls, your thoughts. Irene in New York City. Hey, Irene, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Back at you.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about our choices in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a great danger in the Democratic Party that we seem to feed on each other because we don't consider the other Democrat pure enough. And I don't want to be heretical about this, but I would like to see us concentrate on the younger candidates. I love Bernie. I love Joe, and I think they would be fantastic advisors and mentors, but I think it's time to pass the torch. I know one of your early callers said it was Bernie's turn. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that we pass on.
Yeah, I don't either. I didn't think it was Hillary's turn the last time.
I mean we're not the British aristocracy, you know, moving up to be king or whatever.
Right.
But I do think we have a great field. They're not all on the same page with each other. I like a lot of them. I'm waiting to see others jump in. But I do think we need to look a little bit, and I'm a senior citizen. We need to look at how old Obama became in the White House. He went from a virile young man to an old guy.
Oh,
so I think we need to start out with somebody who's got a little longevity in there.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a senior citizen.
So Elizabeth Warren is in her late 60s. Is she too old for you?
No, I'm in my upper 60s.
So
I think people pushing their up into 80.
Yeah. Well, Bernie would be 76. I think Joe Biden would be 75, or maybe it's the other way around. When the election happens or when they get sworn into office.
If one of them runs, I vote.
Yeah.
I just think we need to open up the opportunities.
Yeah.
Don't just keep going backwards into what we've done before.
I'm frankly, I get that, Irene, and I think that it's probably it's definitely an important consideration. I think a more important one is their politics. And, you know, I want to make sure that at least one of the people on the ticket is a solid progressive. Kamala Harris has a fairly corporatist history in California. Beto O'Rourke didn't even join the Progressive Caucus. He was a member of the neoliberal caucus, the New Democrats. The two of them together would mean that we would basically have the Clinton presidency all over again, which I'm not enthusiastic about, unless they really genuinely change their stripes, if they actually change their policies. We'll see. But Irene, your point is well made. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
17 and a half minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Who do you want to see as the Democratic nominee, and why? And welcome back. Mark in San Jose, California, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I've been watching you for a long time. I think the DNC has a date for nomination, and they should get a pre-nomination and make Kamala or Corey or Amy as the Secretary of State, and make Warren the treasurer because she's got proof that she's refunded money. My only defendants are these global greedy lawyers of the right wing that are doing all the damage worldwide.
So who's the candidate for president, Mark?
Well, whoever, I just want a second pre-nomination date, and whoever's leading at that time, and then run as a team, because you can contrast with these Republicans who we've said, you know, if there was a flesh department, they'd have a flesh-eating nominee. This circulating squad of shooting down Democratic nominees, I think, is so unproductive.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, my only defendant is these right-wing global greedy lawyers and their propaganda that hunts down Don Siegelman, Al Franken, and now you know, the guy from Virginia, and
Justin, what's his name?
You know, runs around and looks for people who are kneeling, and so we
Justin
have a real serious problem, and we need to run as a team. So thank you for entertaining that, Tom.
That's an excellent point, Mark. Thank you for calling and making it. Tina in Grand Marais, Minnesota. Am I saying that right, Tina? Thank you. Watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hi. I have a very, very specific thing I'm looking for. I want to see a Bernie Sanders-style universal health care. And Elizabeth Warren sounded really positive and backed it back, and Kamala Harris made a very strong stand, and then she backed it back. And this has got to be the most important thing, and it's going to help with the inequality, because once we can all get the health care we need and not be, you know, broken trying to pay for it, I think this is really critical. The other thing is we've got to cut the ties with Israel. We have become more like Israel and less like the United States. You know, I grew up when we were really admiring the Israeli army, and now we're sending people over there to be trained for policemen. I mean,
I think it's very unfortunate. I look at Trump's rhetoric with the Southern Wall, and it seems like sometimes it's almost like he's talking about Gaza. It's like he's importing that rhetoric. And over in Israel right now, Bibi Netanyahu is campaigning, you know, under the shadow of a corruption investigation. And his billboard, his giant billboard in downtown, I believe it was Tel Aviv, was him shaking hands with Donald Trump. So, you know, there's kind of a merger that has happened at that level among those two. And I really hope that the progressives in Israel can step up too. Tina, thank you for the call. We'll be back. It's 21 minutes and change past the hour. Stick around. Those folks who support our program, who help essentially sponsor us on YouTube and on Patreon, have access to content, special content that is generally not available on YouTube or anyplace else. In exchange for supporting us at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, you get the whole 3-hour show, a video podcast that's not available to the general public, that you can watch anytime you want for every single show every day, plus special content that is not available anywhere else. The rant this week, 200,000 Americans have died from overdoses involving prescription opioids since 1996. So the question, what do we do with a company and the individuals who own that company and run that company that has been directly or indirectly responsible for the deaths of over 100,000 Americans? What do we do? We've got a serious problem with an out-of-control pharmaceutical industry in the United States, and we need and product liability in general. We need to do something about it.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Homelessness in America. Welcome back. So Blaine in Thousand Oaks, California. Hey Blaine, what are your thoughts on all this?
Hey Tom, you're awesome.
Thank you.
In my humble opinion, the only person that has all the variables it takes to win is Elizabeth Warren. She's driven. She relates to people with her, simple roots of her family. She has all the experience. She has the know-how and the financial, what people really care about, the paychecks and the health care. Beto's too young. Biden's too old school. Kamala's a little too edgy. Bernie's too old. But Warren actually captures all of Bernie's ideals in a younger, female, more appealing package.
Yeah, I would say that if we're looking at the entire race right now, setting aside the third and fourth tier candidates like Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, as I recall, he actually comes across brilliantly, but he's the mayor of a little town, and so he's not going to be taken that kind of seriously. But Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are the only two who started as progressives before they got into politics. When they got into politics and said, I'm not going to take money from corporate donors. They existed as progressives throughout their political careers. Very short one for Elizabeth Warren. She's just been a senator in her second term now. Much longer one for Bernie. He's been in office, 30 years, I think, or thereabouts. Maybe longer. And so those two are the only two that I see that have absolutely solid progressive credentials. Now, that said, you go back to 1932 when Franklin Roosevelt was elected, he was not a progressive. He became one in response to the needs of the country and to the pressure from his wife and from Francis Perkins. But the past doesn't always predict the future. And there is a giant progressive wave breaking across the American political landscape right now that I think is going to sweep, and in fact is sweeping up all these other candidates. But I think you're absolutely right that Elizabeth Warren is Bernie without the male baggage and all that other stuff. On the other hand, Bernie's Bernie. I mean, Bernie is iconic.
Now, I have a theory I'm going to run by you.
Okay.
I think you may be taking too lightly this whole echo chamber. I read it in the print and TV media about Warren's handling of the Native American ancestry thing. What this indicates to me is that she is the one they fear most.
I agree.
Because of this constant noise about how this is going to taint her run for office. If they never mentioned it, it would never be an issue. But,
or if they simply mentioned the fact that the Native Americans who have spoken on the record about Elizabeth Warren have unanimously, to the best of my knowledge, said, we're really pleased that she was proud of having a Native American ancestor. Why would we be upset about that?
So why did she go and I just read where she went and apologized to them.
I know.
Why would she be apologizing if they didn't?
Because the pundit class, we've got this permanent class of political commentators who show up on television, on NPR, right across the board, and they define the middle. And it's total BS. I mean, the actual middle in the United States is Elizabeth Warren, is Bernie Sanders. Those positions that they espouse are what the majority of Americans want. But the pundit class is looking out for wealth and power among the banksters and the big corporations. The pundit class are neoliberals. And they don't like Elizabeth Warren. They don't like Bernie Sanders. And that's the thing that concerns me the most. And it's the pundit class, people who are not elected to anything, just these people who show up on TV constantly, they're the ones who are driving this narrative that Elizabeth Warren has a problem with Native Americans. Blaine, thanks for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And because most of these pundits work for free, the TV networks are not going to let go of them. And it's like reality TV, right? We'll be back. Our book club selection today is the brand new book from Dar Jamail, The End of Ice, Bearing Witness and Finding Meaning in the Path of Climate Disruption. The dedication of the book. This book is dedicated to the future generations of all species. Know that there were many of us who did what we could. This is from the introduction. The fall lasts long enough that I have time to watch the blue ice race upward, eons of time compressed into glacial ice, flashing by in fractions of seconds. I assume I've fallen far enough that I've pulled my climbing partner, Sean, into the crevasse with me. This is what it's like to die in the mountains, a voice in my head tells me. Just as my mind completes that thought, the rope wrenches my climbing harness up. I bounce languidly up and down as the dynamic physics inherent in the rope play themselves out. Somehow, Sean has checked my fall while still on the surface of the glacier. I brush the snow and chunks of ice from my hair, arms, and chest and pull down the sleeves of my shirt. Finding my glacier glasses hanging from the pocket of my climbing bib, I tuck them away. I check myself for injuries and incredibly find none. Assessing my situation, I find there's no ice shelf nearby to ease the tension from the rope so Sean can begin setting up a pulley system to extract me. I look down, nothing but blackness. I look at the wall of blue ice directly in front of me, take a deep breath, and peer up into the tiny hole into which I'd fallen when I'd punched through the snow bridge spanning the crevasse. The same bridge Sean had crossed without incident as we made our way up Alaska's Matanuska Glacier toward Mount Marcus Baker in the Chugach Range. You get to look down one more time, then that's it, I tell myself out loud. Again, there's only a black and void yawning beneath me, swallowing everything, even sound. My stomach clenches. I remind myself to breathe. Sean, are you okay? I yell as I clamp my mechanical ascenders to the rope in preparation to climb up. Yeah, I'm all right, but I'm right on the edge, he calls back. I can't set an anchor to get out of the system, so don't ascend. We're going to have to wait for the other guys to catch up. Time passes. The onset of hyperthermia means I can't control my body from periodically shaking. To ignore my fear of dying, I gaze meditatively at the ice a few feet in front of me as I dangle. The miniature air pockets found in the whiter ice near the top of the glacier have long since been compressed, producing the mesmerizing beauty of centuries-old turquoise ice. Slightly deeper into the crevasse is ice that has been there since long before the Neanderthals. I hang suspended in silence, mindful not to move out of fear of dislodging Sean. Giving my full attention to the ice immediately within my vision, I focus on how the gently refracting light from above seems to penetrate and reflect off the perfectly smooth wall. Staring into it, the blue seems infinite. Despite the danger of my situation, the glacier's beauty calms me. Delicate snowflakes and their infinite possibilities of form land on mountainous terrain. Under its own weight, the snow is compressed into glaciers that scour and shape the face of the earth. Countless millions of tons of weight, aided by the force of gravity, push and pull these frozen rivers downhill, carving out cirques and troughs from uplifted geologic plates and sculpting the majestic heights of mountains that I have been drawn to since I was young. Eventually, our other two teammates arrive and work to extract Sean from his perch just 6 inches from the edge of the crevasse. All three of them set up a three-way pulley system. Laboriously, my teammates begin to haul me up, inches at a time, out of what nearly became my tomb. I continue to focus on the delicately shifting blades of blue in the ice as I draw closer to the surface, mesmerized by its raw beauty. My teammates pull me up to the lip of the crevasse. I repeatedly plunge the pick of my ice axe into the snow and haul myself out, never before as grateful for being on top of a glacier. I stand and gaze up at the mountain to the west, behind which the sun has just set. Snow plumes stream off one of its ridges, turned into ruddy red ribbons by the setting snow. Snowflakes flicker as they float into space. As relief floods my shivering body, I roar in gratitude and relief. Utterly overwhelmed by being alive and surrounded by the beauty of the mountain world, I hug each of my three climbing partners. Now safe, it sinks in how close to death I've been. That was Earth Day 2003. In hindsight, I believe the emotion I felt then stemmed in part from something else. A deeper consciousness that the ice that I had seen, which had existed for eons, was vanishing. 7 years of climbing in Alaska had provided me with a front row seat from where I could witness the dramatic impact of human-caused climate disruption. Each year we found the toe of the glacier had shriveled further. Each year for the annual early ice season festival on this glacier, we found ourselves hiking further up the crusty frozen mud left behind by rapidly retreating terminus. Each year the parking lot was moved closer to the glacier, only to be left further away as the ice withdrew. Even sections of Denali, which stands over 20,000 feet tall and is roughly 250 miles from the Arctic Circle, had undergone startling changes. The ice of its glaciers was disappearing quickly. Our planet is rapidly changing, and what we are witnessing is unlike anything that has occurred in nature or even geologic history. The heat-trapping nature of carbon dioxide and methane, both greenhouse gases, has been scientific fact for decades. And according to NASA, there is no question that increased levels of greenhouse gases must cause the Earth to warm in response. Evidence shows the greenhouse gas emissions are causing the Earth to warm 10 times faster than it should. And the ramifications of this are being felt quite literally throughout the entire biosphere. And then, he goes on, oceans are warming, et cetera. The End of Ice by Dar Jamail.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, the new governor of New Mexico is pulling the New Mexico Army National Guard members away from the state, that state's border. This is newly elected Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. And according to leaks out of California, when newly elected Governor Gavin Newsom gives his State of the State address this week in California, he's going to announce that, quote, the border emergency is a manufactured crisis and California will not be part of this political theater. And he's going to pull California National Guard members away from the border. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is going down to El Paso to pathetically, desperately try to convince people that putting up a wall that separated El Paso from its sister city on the Mexico side of the border somehow reduced crime in El Paso, when in fact it didn't. Crime in El Paso was low before the wall. It was low after the wall. It's one of the safest cities in America. And all along the border, literally every single person who represents a border district in the U.S. House of Representatives, every single one of them, Democrats and Republicans, oppose Donald Trump's, vanity wall. They just oppose it. And now Trump is trying to change the whole debate here. He's saying, oh, well, the Democrats don't want more beds to hold these criminals. We are running internment camps in the United States right now. We've got 48,000 people in internment camps, 60% of them in camps run by for-profit corporations. Trump wants to expand the for-profit corporation part of that. He's asking for more money to give to these giant prison corporations to build new facilities to hold people who haven't committed crimes, who have come to the United States seeking asylum. At the same time, we've got still hundreds, perhaps thousands of children who now, it's been so long, may never again see their parents. Literally, their lives have been destroyed. Even if they're reunited with their parents, many of these children are going to suffer lifelong trauma that's going to devastate their ability to be functional as adults. Donald Trump has done, and Mike Pence and Stephen Miller and Kirsten, what's her name? The Nielsen and John Kelly, these guys, they have done this to us and to America. We are now the home of internment camps again. And Trump thinks that this somehow, he's saying, oh, and the Democrats don't want to have more internment camps. I sure hope the Democrats kick him back in the teeth and say, no, we've got enough internment camps now in America. Every Democrat in America needs to be singing that tune. We have enough internment camps. In fact, we have too many internment camps. It's time to return these children to their parents, and it's time to let these people go. Dejan in Riverside, California. Am I saying your name right? Or is it Dewan?
Dejan.
Dejan. Hey, Dejan, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to get in on the whole 2020 conversation.
Sure.
About the presidential debates and all that. I'm a big Bernie guy. I was in 2016. And I try to follow it as much as I can. And in my opinion, he's really the only option that's going to...
Does it concern you that he would be 80 years old the day that he's sworn in?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. I understand some people that are concerned about it, but, I mean, it's good enough for me to pick a vice president that's as progressive as you are. So if you do happen to kick it, then you have someone to back you up.
Yeah. Yeah, it actually does significantly raise those stakes. But okay, I got it. Thank you, Dejan. John in Orange Park, Florida. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
Okay. I'm wondering if we are missing a great point here with Elizabeth Warren, that the rule is that whatever ounce of a race you have in your DNA, that is your race. You know, in the Caribbean and other places, you have mulattoes, you have negritos, you know, blanquitos, much as what you've seen happening in Venezuela. Why haven't she taken advantage of that fact? I know you said, and I'm glad to hear it, that the Indians are quite proud of her for assuming any part of her DNA. But I don't think it should be a liability. And these pundits, they just got whooped.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a controversy that exists entirely within the world of the pundit class, and I guarantee you that they are all white, well-educated, wealthy Americans, and the Republican Party. Democrats, by and large, are, you know, frankly, I mean, many of us, many Americans, I grew up hearing stories from my mother that she thought that we had a Native American in our ancestry. And in fact, that it was like 4 generations back out of Tennessee. And it was probably a person who was Cherokee. I don't, and I see, and I did a DNA test, and I have a little tiny bit of Native American blood in me. But you know, it was something that you thought was cool. I mean, you know, it's like, whoa, you know, I'm connected to some Native Americans. That's kind of cool. And that's obviously what Elizabeth Warren thought. And I really think that the Native Americans are going to already have, in fact, cut her a lot of slack on that. This is not an issue. John, thank you for the call. Mary in Las Vegas. Hey, Mary.
Hey, morning. I agree with that guy from Thousand Oaks wholeheartedly. It's Elizabeth Warren. She's got fight in her. She came from nothing. She's passed bills. She had her 3-point plan. She didn't have any problem with fighting back and saying Trump might be in jail in 2020. Also, I think she should just embrace the whole Pocahontas thing. It would have my vote wholeheartedly. I think Trump is afraid of her because he's going to go. She wants to go after the money.
Oh, the more that the white conservative pundits on TV talk about this, and that would include, by the way, some of the people who pretend to be news people, but are basically running talk shows on network television. The more that they talk about this issue and the more that Donald Trump talks about this issue, the more certain I am that they are worried. And if you don't think that the big networks that control the media in the United States are worried about a Warren presidency, think again, because they are. I mean, they don't like higher taxes. They don't want to have their power broken up. They don't want, you know, local control rules and things. They know what's coming if a true progressive becomes president. They absolutely know it. So, Mary, well said. Thank you very much. David in Milwaukee. Hey, David, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to WRRD.
Yes. Good afternoon, Tom. Really quickly, I don't see anybody right now that currently could beat Donald Trump. The only 2 people I do see that could potentially do it, one of them is not going to ever run. That would be Michelle Obama. The other one would be Joe Biden. And the reason being, again, I'm basing it as an independent. I want to see somebody, you know, that the Midwest obviously is a huge amount of population, and it's completely different from the coast as far as being progressive. I look at my family in California. The wealth inequality in California is off the charts. Same thing in New York. And, you know, we've had...
If you think it's not in the upper Midwest, I mean, you know, in just outside of Minnesota, Minneapolis is where you've got Stephen J. Hemsley, the CEO of United Healthcare. He's taken over $1 billion out of that company.
Yeah, I understand. But again, overall, though, the overall picture, you don't have the disparities like you do on the coast. On the coast, you have much more disparity.
There might be more conspicuous wealth on the coasts, I'll give you that. But I don't see what that has to do with, you know, no Democrat being able to beat Trump. I think Trump is going to be easy to beat. He's got a base that is with him, and that's about 1/3 of Americans. It's about a little more than 2/3 of Republicans. That's not enough to win an election. I don't see how he wins against anybody.
Well, this is the only other thing I'm going to just point out and take another call. So let's say Howard Schultz runs as third-party candidate. There's no question, and then Trump wins the presidency because he's going to pull off enough votes, and people might not like this. And
I don't think so. I think, David, the days when you could say, you know, we really don't need to raise taxes on rich people, that's just going to upset them. Those days are over.
Pull about 8 or 9%.
David, seriously consider why Donald Trump won the election. I mean, outside of the incompetence of the Clinton campaign, not going to Wisconsin and all that kind of nonsense, and the fact that Clinton actually won by 3 million votes. But the reason why Trump got as close as he did is because he lied in ways that caused Midwesterners, the people that you're talking about, to think that he was progressive. Trump said he was going to raise taxes on rich people. He said he would be the worst thing ever to happen to billionaires. Remember that? He said he was going to give us all a national health care plan that would cost less than Obamacare and would cover more things. He said that he was going to not just impose tariffs the willy-nilly way that he's done it, but he said, systematically, he was going to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. He hasn't. He said he was going to renegotiate NAFTA in a way that would help Americans. The renegotiation of NAFTA, we're going to be talking with Lori Wallach about this in the next hour. Basically, the only thing that renegotiation does is increase the profits of the pharmaceutical companies. It allows them to exploit Mexico and Canada the same way they're exploiting the United States. I mean, everything he has done has been a scam, but the original sales pitch that he said was a progressive sales pitch. It was a semi-progressive one, but from the Republican field, it was wildly progressive. No more stupid wars. George W. Bush is a war criminal. I mean, you can go through the list. I think and now Americans get it. They see that he's got an oil lobbyist in charge of the Interior Department. He's got a coal lobbyist overseeing the coal industry. He's got a chemical lobbyist running the EPA. He's got a banker who runs a bank that does money laundering as his commerce secretary. He's got a billionaire with 10 100-foot yachts who hates public education and has worked to destroy it for years in charge of his education department. People have figured out that he has put the swamp back into the swamp. And, I just don't see how he gets elected. I want to focus on getting the very best electable candidate that we can get. We're going to check in with Bob Ney and Talk Media News in just a few minutes.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Another 4 minutes from now, we'll check in with Talk Media News and find out what else is going on in the world. Stick around. And welcome back. Clarence in Baltimore watching us on YouTube. Hey, Clarence, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? This is, you said it, Clarence out of Baltimore. I was a fan of Bernie 16.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I'm not anymore. It's just that, not that he's old. It's just, I don't think people are going to go that route with him. Like, you know how you hook up with a girl and then it's great at first, and then all of a sudden things goes back to normal. And I think they've already saw Bernie, so people are looking for, I don't know, something new. Like the lady was saying, a younger person. Now, when you get to all the other candidates, I don't think any of them could beat Bernie in a nomination.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
well, I don't know about that, Clarence. But I get your point that the initial romance has turned into just a relationship. And, and also the point that people continuously seem to forget is that in 2016, the Democratic Party presented us with Hillary Clinton as a fait accompli. She already has enough votes just from the superdelegates that nobody can beat her, right? That she just kind of, it was supposed to be a coronation. And the only alternative was Bernie. So, now Bernie's not the only alternative anymore.
Right. Yeah, true. And
So-
I'm from Connecticut originally,
Mhm.
so I moved down here. But I was going to vote in 2016 if Bernie would have ran. If the DNC ain't pull that BS, then Bernie, I would have voted for him. I would have either put in an absentee or I would have made my way. But this was already a blue state. I'm in Maryland, so I was not going to vote for Hillary. Just because it did nothing. And then I didn't know the local politicians here, X, Y, Z. But now you have a new era. And it's not even there, because what happened with Kamala, and I noticed Joy Reid, they were talking about ADOS, that we bots and stuff like that, but I'm here to say it's very real. It's very real. There are people out here that have been struggling for centuries, but decades we could talk about, since the Civil Rights Movement, and 1% of the wealth, and I understand the wealth inequality for everybody, but I think Bernie needs to address specific people you know, and that's how you do trickle up economics. You know what I mean? Because when your lowest get, because
What do you mean by that, Clarence? Address specific people.
At just all of the tactics to keep, you know, the black community, the American descendants of slaves, not, you know, people coming over, not immigrants, stuff like that. I'm talking about us, like with redlining, with the acceleration of the prison population in the 90s, which I was a part of. A lot of my friends that took us out of the homes, that got men, you know, today just a lot of black men are messed up because of that.
Yeah.
You know, and you combine that with and that's why Kamala, oh no, we're not electing a cop. You know, especially one like her, who she was locking up black women for their kids being truant. Like, are you serious?
Wow.
You know, I mean, it's ridiculous with her and Cory Booker. He's just going to do what they tell him to do. You know, when he said about Northam, he said that he said that we need to put ourselves in white people's shoes. I'm like, who the hell said? I'm like, no, we don't.
Yeah. Okay, Clarence, thank you. This is a tough one to mediate or moderate. We'll see where this all goes. It's 49 minutes past the hour. It's Bob Ney with Talk Media News is up next. Stick around. Just did a rant about how we have actually passed a major climate change tipping point that we can't walk back from. We can't stop it. This is coming now. It is unstoppable. This first step of it, which has to do with, you know, the destruction of major cities in the United States and all around the world. You can check this out over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, or for people who support us on YouTube as well, you can see this. Get over to patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN to check this out. We're talking about how prior to a couple of years ago, and this is how, you know, tipping points, you can only see them in the rearview mirror. Prior to a couple of years ago, in the winter, the Arctic and Greenland, the Antarctic and Greenland would recover some of their ice. Now they're not even doing that. It's just pausing. The melting is just pausing. That's that tipping point. And the consequences of this are going to be terrible. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
What's going on in the world today? Let's find out. Bob Ney is with us with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Bob is the author of Sideswipe, former congressman from Ohio, and now a reporter for Talk Media News. So, Bob, what's up?
Well, Tom, shutdown or no shutdown, we probably will know very soon. One indicator will be that the Democratic-controlled House will put up a stopgap measure, most likely by tomorrow, because there's a 72-hour House rule, unless everybody would not object, which is not the case. So, you know.
So Friday is the day that it goes down in flames, but because of that 72-day rule or hour rule, they've got to do it by tomorrow.
Oh, they have to. So really, they can get past tonight, and they could, you know, do something maybe in the morning, but they have to do something because they do have that 72-hour rule. Now, even if the Republican side would agree to waiver that, somebody would object to that, you know, for sure, on some side. So they basically have till about tomorrow morning at the latest. And if you see the Democratic side, again, post a stopgap measure, which is a wise thing to do, if, you know, for maybe...
Was that another few months, you mean?
Well, yeah, they could say, look, we're going to do a stopgap. Well, even they could say we're going to do a stopgap measure, last try for another couple of days if they want, or another 3 days or another week. You know, it's a strategy point, frankly, Tom, if they do that, because what's going to change? You know, now the argument is down to also the amount of beds that are designated.
Well, that's a question for you, Bob. You know, from my point of view, we know now that we've got 50,000 beds for people who have come here seeking asylum, which, by the way, is not a crime. And we've got 48,000 people in those 50,000 beds right now, and about 60% of them are for-profit private prison companies that make big contributions to the Republican Party. And Trump wants to expand the number of people in these beds, the number of beds, rather. I call these internment camps. And I think that if the Democrats were to flip this upside down and go after Trump and say, wait a minute, we've got 48,000 people in internment camps right now. If you want to make sure that people are going to show up for their court dates, you know, people who are looking for asylum, put an ankle bracelet on them. But they don't, you know, we don't need to build more internment camps, and started using that language. Do you think that that's strong enough to overcome, you know, I get it over on the Republican side, there's a bunch of people, oh, you got brown people in jail, that's a good thing. What do you think?
Well, you know, you make a great point, Tom, because look, right now, as you and I talk, and you described it perfectly, but when people read this story, all they know is that the Democratic side is trying to limit it to 16,000 beds for, quote, criminal offenders, right? That's the story that's out there. So on the Democratic side, they have not done, frankly, a good job of trying to describe what they're actually trying to do, because now the media puts out, well, you know, they're trying to limit it to 16,000 beds, again, with
but there's not even 16,000 criminal offenders in there. Of those 48,000 people, virtually all of them are simply people seeking asylum.
Right, and so those people are all designated, you know, as quote, criminals, which they aren't.
But they're not. They're not. I mean, the only due process, or the only judicial process they're involved in is an attempt to have an asylum claim heard.
Correct, and also if people are released, we know statistically that the vast majority come back for their hearings. In fact, more people who come here and overstay a visa are the ones that, you know, have stayed, not the people that came into the United States seeking asylum and residency.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the sticking point.
So you agree with me that the Democrats are not messaging this well, and that this is a vulnerability for them.
It's the way they're messaging it is way off track, because, again, when I read the story of what the sticking point was, I'm sitting there going, okay, let's see. So the Democratic side is trying to limit it to 16,000 beds for criminal activities. And, I mean, if you read the story, it looks that way. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to reduce these camps, period.
Well, I think they're also talking about expanding the number of beds for actual criminals.
Right, and they actually could put some money into the adjudication process. I don't know what the numbers are now, but when I was there, Tom, we had 400 and some thousand backed up cases. You know, that people weren't given their
immigration
process
cases
in time of adjudication.
Right.
So they can try to correct that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nutshell. But yes,
but this is the point at which people's eyes glaze over, Bob, in the conversation, and that's the problem. Trump, you know, Trump has got his bumper sticker, and the Democrats don't, and that's a mortal danger to the Democrats right now. What else is going on, Bob?
That's correct. Well, the big merger, $26 billion. Now there's a little bit of split in the Democratic side because
you're talking about the two big banks or the two big phone companies.
Yes, it's of course it's T-Mobile and Sprint.
T-Mobile and Sprint. Yeah.
And AT&T and Sprint tried this before. If you look back at the history of this, now it's Sprint and T-Mobile. And part of the argument, the progressives are saying, no, this is too big. And by the way, this still has to go through California regulation. It passed New York, not California at this point in time. And then the other side is saying, well, wait a minute, you know, this will make a better 5G network and more competition against AT&T. So not that Congress can officially do anything, but people are starting to weigh in on, you know, this merger.
Yeah, and as long as the Supreme Court is continuing to hold to the Bork doctrine, you know, it'll probably get passed.
Absolutely.
You had one last point you want to make real quick?
Oh, just that the Republicans are forming a lobby group because they're going to have trouble trying to get Trump's new NAFTA through.
Oh yeah, I read that, and it's the big pharma is like one of the biggest funders of it, because Trump's new NAFTA just screws us all and really helps out big pharma. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Good talking with you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America. Our book today is Confessions of a Rogue Nuclear Regulator by Gregory B. Jackso, former chairman of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I'm going to start with the last paragraph of Chapter 1, and then I'll start reading Chapter 2. In hindsight, the Fukushima incident revealed what has long been the sad truth about nuclear safety. The nuclear power industry has developed too much control over the NRC and Congress. In the aftermath of the accident, I found myself moving from my role as a scientist impressed by nuclear power to a fierce nuclear safety advocate. I now believe that nuclear power is more hazardous than it's worth. Because the industry relies too much on controlling its own regulation, the continued use of nuclear power will lead to catastrophe in this country or somewhere else in the world. This is a truth we must all confront. Chapter 2. The Fukushima accident in Japan was not the first accident to belie the promise of nuclear power. In its early years, the commercial nuclear industry had only a limited understanding of the operations, science, and engineering of actual power plants. This ignorance led to the first major nuclear power plant accident just outside Harrisburg, the state capital of Pennsylvania, in 1979. 3 Mile Island prompted a flurry of reforms and a pile of promises that the public would be protected from future nuclear calamities. Through the mid-1980s, it appeared these promises were being kept. Construction on new plants slowly resumed without major accidents. Then suddenly, strange radiation measurements were detected in Sweden. Governments in Europe and throughout the world soon learned that a disaster had occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Soviet Union. Like a developing photograph in a bath of chemicals, the reality of nuclear power was starting to come clear. One nuclear accident was an oversight, a mistake, an aberration. 2 nuclear accidents hinted at a serious problem with the technology. A third would cement the conclusion that nuclear power plants were simply going to have accidents on a relatively consistent schedule. After 3 Mile Island, after Chernobyl, the third accident nearly occurred in 2002 at the troubled Davis-Besse nuclear power plant in Ohio. The problem is that with each new accident, all the people in charge of nuclear safety seemed to revert to the belief that this one would be the last one. As chairman of the NRC, I battled nearly every day against this instinct to believe that the worst was over. You can prepare for the next accident only if you get all the players to admit that a next one is coming, even if and when are impossible to predict. Before Fukushima, too many people I encountered simply did not believe the next one would ever come. Their view is not surprising. Accidents are rare, and Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island had happened decades earlier. Yet I continue to believe I could challenge this complacency. I seized one opportunity just after I became chairman. 4 days before President Obama tapped me to lead the commission, I spoke at a conference organized by the North American Young Generation in Nuclear, an industry group of professionals entering the field as nuclear operators, designers of reactors, or academic experts in nuclear technology. As I looked out at the crowd, it dawned on me that many of these people had never lived through a nuclear power accident. Even if I had been only 9 years old when 3 Mile Island occurred, when Chernobyl happened, I was a teenager, more worried about surviving my freshman year of high school than about nuclear disaster. The people I was speaking to were even younger. I wondered how they had experienced these seminal events. Being a scientist, I decided to conduct an experiment. I asked everyone in the audience to stand if they were born after 1979, the year of 3 Mile Island. Nearly everyone stood. After they sat down, I asked them to stand if they were born after 1986, the date of the Chernobyl accident. Once again, nearly everyone stood. These industry-defining accidents have become dry case studies taught in college classes. The next generation of American nuclear power professionals has never experienced the confusion of a nuclear accident as it is happening. And so it's essential that we remember and teach the lessons of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, for reviewing these accidents shows common themes of missed opportunity, human failings, and technological overconfidence. No amount of forgetting can change these simple facts. The March 1979 accident at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania seems almost like something out of a science fiction horror film. The cover of Time magazine captured the national mood of chaos, confusion, and fear. The emergency red phrase "nuclear nightmare" slashed across the dark black cooling towers of the plant. There was no live-streamed video, as there would be after the Fukushima accident, but the public could imagine the scene inside the reactor. Just 12 days before the accident, The China Syndrome, a feature film starring Jane Fonda and Michael Douglas as reporters who uncover a major incident in a nuclear plant, had been released. Perhaps the hundreds of journalists gathered outside Harrisburg believed they too would land such a story. It started on March 28th at around 4 a.m. when a water pump stopped working. The failed pump affected the steam generators, large cylinders filled with many tiny metal tubes that help turn hot water from the nuclear engine into steam so that the turbines can generate electricity. When the flow of water was cut off, this massive heat exchange stopped working, creating the conditions for a serious accident. The reactor engine was immediately turned off, but so long as the reactor fuel remained hot, which it would for quite some time, its natural radioactive decay would continue, producing enough heat, called decay heat, to melt through the metal containers enclosing the reactor fuel. This same problem would later affect Fukushima. And then he goes through the whole process there. Confessions of a Rogue Nuclear Regulator by Gregory B. Jackso.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us is our old buddy Lori Wallach. Lori is the executive director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. TradeWatch.org is the website. Also citizen.org/trade. You can tweet her at I don't have a Twitter handle here for you. Lori, what's your Twitter handle?
Lori_Wallach.
There you go, Lori_Wallach. And Lori, I read a story here that there is a lobbying group specifically that was put together in the last few days or the last few weeks, specifically to lobby for Donald Trump's new reinvention of NAFTA, and that it's being funded by Big Pharma and Big Oil, among a few other big companies, no consumer groups or anything like that. What does this tell us about what's going on?
Well, folks, it's on. I mean, it doesn't get much clearer than having Big Pharma and Big Oil lobbying not only to try and pass the agreement as is, but to get taken out the things that progressives won. So this lobby group, which has raised $5 million and says they're trying to raise $20 million, is trying to get the outrageous corporate investor states tribunal stuffed back into the NAFTA renegotiation. That's one of the things we won. We got that out. They want to get longer giveaways for Big Pharma. Already as it is, the agreement as is isn't worth supporting because it would do more damage by locking in the policy.
High prices for pharmaceuticals, right?
So the mission of progressives, the progressives in Congress, of the unions, of the consumer groups, environmental groups, family, farm, and faith groups, is to get the things we won delivered. So ISDS out, the mandatory natural resources exports language out, that we won that. We want to keep that. We need to get rid of the new bad things that Big Pharma and Big Oil stuffed into NAFTA, like special new protections that would keep medicine prices high and lock in place those policies, or saving investor state just for oil and gas companies to attack some Mexican environmental laws. And then we need to get the stuff that wasn't finished done. And that's stronger labor and environmental standards with strong enforcement, which is what's necessary to stop the outsourcing. That's the mission, and that corporate lobby group is on the exact opposite mission.
Do you think that it's going to occur to Trump supporters and Republicans that if the corporate lobbyists are amassing millions of dollars to push for Trump's reinvention of NAFTA, he's calling it something else, Mexico-America trade agreement or whatever, that means that the average working person is going to get screwed, or are they just, saluting the flag, whatever Trump says?
I think that we have just finished focus groups and polling that shows that it becomes apparent that this deal is a deal for big pharma and for the big oil companies. That's the only issue that actually the Trump voters find suspicious. Like, generally, by default, they think he's doing okay by trying to keep jobs from being outsourced. Like, we know that's not true. Footnote, the big GM announcement of closing a bunch of American plants, having just opened some new ones in Mexico. But for whatever reason, his voters think he's doing fine by that. But the police that their hackles come up is when they see big pharma and big oil as winners. And then they realize they're getting screwed in the NAFTA renegotiation.
So to make this real, I mean, bumper stickers always work well if you can attach actual numbers to them. They give credibility to claims, like the Republicans saying, oh, the Democrats only want 16,000 beds for criminal, that kind of thing. How much will our pharmaceutical prices go up, or will they go up in other countries if Trump's deal goes through? Do we have any idea?
Yep. So here's the deal with that. Big Pharma did manage to stuff into the renegotiated NAFTA rules that would lock in place the policies that now make U.S. medicine prices unreasonably high. So the prices in our country, the question is, will the one thing the whole country is united on, nationwide and across partisan divides, we've got to lower prices. Our Congress's hands going to be tied with NAFTA so that they can't do that. So, number two, are we going to export our bad policies to Mexico and Canada? Already a lot of people get less expensive drugs from Canada. This would raise prices in Canada by creating new monopolies that the Canadian government would have to give Big Pharma. And Mexico would get totally clobbered because they don't have any of these special goodies that the agreement would require every country to give. We have them. That's why our medicine prices are so ridiculously high. So to get our prices down, we've got to get this stuff out of the agreement. And to make sure we don't raise prices in Mexico and Canada, we have to. And the good news is there is a lot of unity in the House of Representatives. And you have to get a trade agreement through the House, not just the Senate. And the House, unity amongst the Democrats who now have a majority. So this is really the pivot issue. If we can get this issue dealt with, that is critical for the president to get any agreement through Congress, which means he's going to have to deal with it if we make it a big deal.
So it seems to me that NAFTA actually is a treaty, and the Constitution is very clear that treaties have to be passed with 2/3 of the Senate. It has to do with two different countries, us and or three in this case, us, Canada, and Mexico. It has to do with trade. I mean, this is clearly laid out in the Constitution. Somewhere along the line, I think it was during the Nixon era, Congress said, well, we're not going to call these things treaties anymore. We're going to call them trade agreements. And therefore, instead of passing with 2/3 of the Senate, which is a pretty high bar to reach, they can pass with a simple majority in the House and the Senate. Am I wrong, Laurie, to think that this is still a scam, that this is still essentially unconstitutional, and that, frankly, somebody should take this to the Supreme Court?
Well, unfortunately, that decision basically happened around the turn into the 20th century. And it was legislated and locked in the 1934 Reciprocal Tariffs Act. These agreements haven't been seen as treaties since the late 1800s, tariff agreements. And moreover, they've been seen as international executive agreements needing congressional approval statutorily since the 30s. Nixon definitely came up with a crafty way to lock in presidential power relative to Congress's power in making those kind of agreements.
That was fast track, right?
Nixon made it worse with fast track, exactly.
Right.
But it was in the 30s that actually, officially, what basically ended as practice by 1900 became legislated. And I hate to tell you, politically, the Senate is a place that most trade agreements just go through like a luge run, no matter who has control of them.
Yeah.
So there's never been a trade agreement stopped in the Senate. It's in the House,
right,
where members have to face their constituents in an election every 2 years. The trade agreements get stopped.
So
we're worried.
Last question: If NAFTA, if Trump's version of NAFTA is Mexico-America trade deal or whatever you call it, if that is stopped, does that mean that NAFTA goes away, or does that mean that we simply default back to the old NAFTA?
So the way this is going to play out is, over the next couple of weeks, the Democrats in Congress are going to end up communicating to the administration, look, you made some progress in some things we've always wanted changed, but you put in this big pharma stuff. It's a non-starter. It's got to come out. We're not going to lock in high medicine prices and give big pharma big stops. And you still haven't done the right stuff completely on environmental and labor standards and enforcement to try and slow down the outsourcing and the transition of middle-class jobs in the U.S. to sweatshop jobs in Mexico. So, Mr. President, if you want to pass this trade agreement, it needs to go through the House. And if you want to get through the House, here are the things that have to happen. And then we'll see what the president does. If the president says, taking home my marbles, not going to play, then we could actually see a scenario where there would be an attempt to withdraw from NAFTA, which the president has the authority to do. The problem for him is that's not going to stop the outsourcing entirely, because unless there's an agreement that raises wages in Mexico, there's going to still be a big draw to outsource jobs. So the president really won't be delivering on his promises to stop the outsourcing if he just hands NAFTA. He really kind of has to work with the Democrats to make those changes to do the thing he promised on the campaign, or he's opening himself up to enormous attacks, just like you said, of being the hack of big pharma and big oil.
Yeah. Well, I'm willing to start that right now. Trump is the hack for big pharma and big oil. Lori Wallach, Executive Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, tradewatch.org. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. As always, we'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. Hey, Marta, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi.
Hey, Marta.
Yes. I am supporting Bernie Sanders, and I'm just going to give a very quick list. I don't want to attack the other candidates, but I think we've, just compromised way too much with the Republicans and the corporate lobbyists. And NAFTA is one of the big issues. But Bernie Sanders has unwavering commitment and has been a leader in small dollar donations, breaking up the big banks, taking on Netanyahu and the illegal settlements, free college, single-payer Medicare for all. He's the one who has spoken out against the prison industrial complex. He's taken on Yemen, and the the Congress needs to take responsibility for declaring war. Mm-hmm. He's led the way on $15 minimum wage, fair trade, not neoliberal, free trade, the Green New Deal. He's been leading the way on that for the past 4 years. And when it comes to war, diplomacy, and solving the underlying causes of conflict, finally ending Trump's war on Venezuela. What do you think?
Those are all really, really important points, and Bernie is solid on all of them. I'm pretty sure on every single one of those points you would find Elizabeth Warren in alignment with Bernie, but I'm also pretty sure that you would not find that all of the other candidates are. And the question in my mind is to how rapidly and how far are they going to swing? I mean, Kamala Harris was, the news report that I just saw 5 minutes ago, over the weekend apparently, was in the Hamptons with the Clintons and all of their wealthy donors hanging out. I get that, you know, the kiss the ring of the former president and the person who almost became president and all that kind of stuff. But to what extent is that going to help versus hurt? I don't know. But Marta, I'm with you. Bernie is the guy. Thank you for the call. Rick in Quincy, Mass. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Yeah, hi there. Going on, if there is an election in 2020, it's between Bernie and Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is kind of wavering on, it comes to Venezuela, and Elizabeth is wavering on the Venezuela thing. And I think this whole Trump on his State of the Union, he was talking about his wonderful economy, and the only way it'll go down if there's wars or investigations. And that's when I say if there is an election in 2020, because this bubble that Wall Street created on his election, it's going to pop. And he was our apprentice for 14 years, and now he's the CEO. He's gone through 2 years, and he's got a lot of damage left to do in the next 2 years. So if there's an election, yeah, I like Elizabeth, but is she overly corporate? And she's got that Venezuela thing.
I guarantee you, Elizabeth Warren is not overly corporate. I don't know what her position is on Venezuela, and I frankly don't know what Bernie's is, although I can guess it. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, that's the fascinating thing about American politics is eventually it all shakes out. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Just did a rant about how we have actually passed a major climate change tipping point that we can't walk back from. We can't stop it. This is coming now. It is unstoppable. This first step of it, which has to do with, you know, the destruction of major cities in the United States and all around the world. You can check this out over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, or for people who support us on YouTube as well, you can see this. Get over to patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN to check this out. We're talking about how prior to a couple of years ago, and this is how, you know, tipping points, you can only see them in the rearview mirror. Prior to a couple of years ago, in the winter, the Arctic and Greenland, the Antarctic and Greenland, would recover some of their ice. Now they're not even doing that. It's just pausing. The melting is just pausing. That's that tipping point. And the consequences of this are going to be terrible. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So much. Welcome back. Mark in San Francisco. Hey, Mark, thanks for listening to AM 910. What's up?
That's a pleasure, Tom. You know, I think Kamala Harris brings some things to the table that are pretty important. One, she's a minority. She's a woman. She's a prosecutor by trade, so she could prosecute the injustice that's been done on the American people by the Republicans and the 1%. And I know her policies are pretty good because she's for the Green New Deal. She's for tax fairness. We'll just have to see how far she goes on those, but keep your eyes on her. She's good.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But you know, you live in California. That's a strong endorsement. Mark, thank you. Mike in Munster, Indiana. Hey, Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to talk about the children's separation at the border.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if it's even legal if every Democratic nominee for president were to say, when we get into office, all you families we reunite automatically get citizenship.
You can't say that as a presidential candidate. That would require legislation. But, you know, so it'd have to go through Congress. But you could certainly say that you'd love to sign something to that effect. I think that at this...
The president wouldn't have ability to grant citizenship through his administration
to the best of my knowledge, the only kingly power, the only power that the president has to kind of go around the law or do something that no other person in America can do is the power to pardon. I don't think that he has the power to make citizens. But, you know, I get what you're saying, and I get the sentiment, and I am just horrified by the fact that hundreds, perhaps thousands of children, certainly thousands of children have already been wounded, but hundreds of them are still in the custody of the Trump administration and without their parents, and in many cases in situations where they cannot be touched, they cannot be held. These kids are going to be so damaged. This is just a crime. This is an absolute friggin' crime. Michael in Princeton, Minnesota. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hello, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. What I was thinking about is that whatever candidate gets to the forefront, I think they're going to get there a lot more quickly if they have specifics on the finances as far as countering what the Republicans have done and in order to initiate the programs that they want.
You're talking about fixing the economy?
Yeah, fixing the economy and progressing our agenda. Because, you know, anytime I talk to my friends and stuff like that, you know, they always say, well, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? So they're going to have to get specific on the campaign trail. And I think if we can get like an economist or something, you know, somebody that's really well-versed in the economy, I think they're going to run into the forefront real rapidly.
Well, I mean, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are the two that have been singing economy for their entire political careers.
Right.
And they're very solid on that. We'll see where everybody else goes, but Michael, thank you. I think you're right. Sean in North Platte, Nebraska. Hey, Sean, what's up? Thanks for watching us on YouTube.
Yeah, I think the best candidates are Bernie Sanders and Beto O'Rourke.
Now, these guys have very different political philosophies. Beto was part of the neoliberal caucus, the New Dems, the Bill Clinton caucus, and Bernie he was the co-founder of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which Beto never chose to join. So how do you come up with these two guys being the best?
Well, I think Beto would win a lot of votes from the southern states and the Bible Belt states, and I think Bernie, he speaks on unions and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and I think it'd kind of be a kind of a two. I don't know how to say it, Tom. How would you say it? I think it'd kind of be bring in a lot of voters. And like when I was campaigning for Bernie Sanders back in 2006 for the primary, I had people tell me, well, I can't support Hillary Clinton and I can't support Donald Trump. I had Republicans, probably about 20 of them, telling me I can't support Hillary Clinton, I can't support Donald Trump, but I can support Bernie Sanders. And where it comes to Beto O'Rourke, he would bring in a lot of Southern votes. You know,
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I talked about this on the air, but, when I was living in Washington, D.C. in a marina that has a heavily Republican, heavily military population, and a number of those people, and in fact, I think one of them came on the air with me one day, this was during the primary, said that they didn't like Donald Trump, even though they'd never voted for a Democrat in their lives. And they weren't excited about voting for Hillary Clinton, but they would vote for Bernie Sanders in a heartbeat. They saw how genuine he was. And I think that it was when Trump seemed genuine, when he told all those lies about how he was going to raise taxes on billionaires, he was going to make sure everybody in America had health care. When he told those lies, but he did it in a way that was convincing. He's such a very, very, very good con man. This guy's been a grifter his entire life, and he's got the con down. That was when he captured those votes back after Bernie was out of the race. And I don't think those people are going to vote for him again. Sean, thanks for the call, particularly the military. I think they've got his number. But, time will tell, and never underestimate the power of Fox News and right-wing hate radio.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So who do you want to see running on the Democratic ticket in 2020? Why and why? More of your calls after the break. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Robin Marty. It's titled Handbook for a Post-Roe, as in Roe v. Wade, for a Post-Roe America. And the cut line on the front says, the future without Roe is coming straight at us. This is the roadmap you need for the tough times ahead. This is from Chapter 7, page 101, titled Knowing Your Comfort Zone, Why Civil Disobedience. Access to abortion and birth control isn't just a health care issue and an economic issue, it's also a civil rights issue. And like every civil rights battle, gains are made through acts of civil disobedience or working outside the legal framework. Married people officially gained the right to access birth control only after Estelle Griswold, the executive director of the Planned Parenthood League of Connecticut, opened a clinic and began offering contraception in direct opposition to the 1960s state law forbidding it. That right was extended to single people in 1972 after Bill Baird was arrested in 1967 for purposely flaunting the Massachusetts law and publicly providing contraceptives to an unmarried woman during a college lecture. The Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion spent much of the 1960s and early 70s prior to the Roe decision, assisting pregnant people in finding safe abortions either from legal or illegal providers throughout the country and across the borders. And there were groups like Jane's Collective that provided the service themselves, even at the risk of their own arrest. Today, people are highlighting a number of issues through acts of civil disobedience. North Carolina had weekly mass arrests at their state capitol during Moral Mondays protests, while the Black Lives Matter movement physically closed highways with their bodies. And of course, when Brett Kavanaugh was appointed to the Supreme Court, hundreds of activists were arrested, some multiple times, for interrupting his hearings, protesting in the Hart Building when it became clear the Senate Judiciary was not going to investigate claims of past sexual assault. Some protesters even blocked the stairs prior to Kavanaugh's swearing-in ceremony. As our society recedes further into racism, sexism, xenophobia, and classism, opposing the power structure through nonviolent means grows more imperative. Aaron Mattson, the co-founder of the reproductive rights group Repro Action in Teen Vogue, wrote, "If Roe is overturned or gutted, it is certain that some states will propose and enact some abortion bans, new abortion bans. Again, nonviolent civil disobedience should remain on the table, this time targeting state and municipal level lawmakers. We must remember that while in several contexts abortion rights supporters lack immediate political power, in spite of the fact that nearly 7 in 10 Americans do not want to see Roe overturned, we always retain the power of using our bodies to stop or slow the machinery of state repression." End of quote. Mattson adds, ultimately, it's up to activists to decide. Are we willing to break convention if lobbying fails? Are we willing to strategically expose ourselves to the risks of arrest? And if we are not, are we willing to look into the eyes of the future generations who will be incarcerated for abortions, miscarriages, and pregnancy complications? End of quote. Repro Action is a growing network of state-based activists that conducts political events, teach-ins, and other direct actions to increase access to abortion and birth control services. They currently have national campaigns as well as individual campaigns in D.C., Virginia, Missouri, Arkansas, and Wisconsin. You can join up with or financially support Repro Action to increase their national and local reach. Subchapter title, Is Civil Disobedience Right for Me? What are you willing to do to make sure that you, the people you know, or even total strangers have access to contraception and abortion care, especially once more abortion options become illegal? Are you willing to be arrested if you participate in direct action or nonviolent protest? Is helping someone obtain abortion pills worth a potential prison sentence? Would you drive a teen to another state to get an abortion if that drive makes you an abortion facilitator and thus a federal criminal? You may believe you're willing to risk everything to help someone get an abortion, and that may well be what is needed in some cases in a post-Roe America. But make sure that you've really thought out all the consequences of such a radical approach. These are the questions you should be asking yourself now before new laws are put into place. One small silver lining of the Trump era is the way it has energized so many people to actively resist the political agenda. There are more activists, donors, candidates, and protesters than there have been in decades. And that means lots of people who can work together and step in when and where people are needed. But in certain geographic areas, it is and will continue to be harder to find those with the ability and privilege to do resistance work. For example, with the Trump administration's increasing militarization of ICE and border security, checkpoints into and out of America will be more scrutinized than ever before. With a population that in many cases is literally trapped in places like the Rio Grande Valley or Las Cruces, where undocumented people can neither leave the country for services nor go further into the U.S. for care, the need for additional action and people who have the willingness and ability to act may be greater than in New York City or the Bay Area. Maybe you have a very specific skill set. You might be medically trained, have a legal background, or maybe you've done counseling or social work, or you're a member of the clergy. These are people who will add a lot of value to the movement, especially if it turns out civil disobedience is the right way to proceed. Ask yourself if you're the only person who can do the thing you're considering doing, or if there's a number of people like you who are planning to step up. Then ask yourself what sort of risk you may be running and how those factors balance out. It's almost impossible to be a solitary activist these days, but there are spaces where you can manage. Letter writing campaigns, social media campaigns, information distribution, and fundraising can all be accomplished in a fairly solitary environment. Handbook for a Post-Roe America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Beverly in Austin, Texas. Hey, Beverly, what's on your mind today?
I'm voting for Elizabeth Warren. I have 4 points that influence me.
Okay.
She has shown us that she can get things done. Number 2, she knows the issues. Number 3, she relates to the public the best. And number 4, Trump using Elizabeth as the conduit to put focus on the Native American condition may be a blessing in the long run, just the way that he has electrified us all to seek truth from lies in government. I am 86 years old. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you, Beverly. Very well said, and I endorse every single one of your points. Thank you. Scott in Alameda, California. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, Tom. So I want to hopefully get people to stop focusing on identity politics and start focusing on policy politics.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly when you talk about Kamala Harris, the idea is that it's important that we get basic structural changes in place, and one of the most basic structural changes would be a tax on Wall Street, which would fund all these changes. Half-cent tax on stock transactions.
Right, going back to the stat tax. Yep.
Yeah. So we need to do that, but we have to be careful because you have these personalities. Everybody's talking about personalities. Well, is Kamala, and even Michelle. Everybody's talking about Michelle Obama. It's not about personalities. It's about program.
Yeah, Michelle Obama is, I mean, she may be a variable in the election if she becomes an effective campaign surrogate, but she's never evinced any interest in running for political office, and she's not going to be some giant Hail Mary pass or something like that. And if she tried, I think she'd run into the same problem that Hillary Clinton did, which is a lot of people saying, hey, just because your husband was president doesn't mean you can be. You know, start at the bottom. Now, Hillary actually did that. I mean, she went into the United States Senate. She represented the state of New York, you know, through 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. She proved that she could be an effective politician, and then said, I want to become president. But Michelle Obama doesn't have that. But that's, you know, outside of that and the tax, which I frankly think are just pure sexist, on Amy Klobuchar for being a tough boss, you know, which men are celebrated for. Outside of those two things, I haven't heard any discussion about personality, Scott.
Well, I've heard a lot of talk about personality, particularly when it comes to Kamala Harris. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm seeing. And you heard it just earlier with the caller who said that they wouldn't vote, they can't vote for a cop. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and
but that was her job. I mean, that's you know.
And no, let me just say this. Kirsten Gillibrand and Tulsi Gabbard are unacceptable to people who are looking for change. I'm sorry. They don't have the program. Okay. The program
Kirsten Gillibrand's past is really going to work against her. I mean, she used to work for the tobacco companies, right? And she's the one who called on Al Franken to leave the Senate. So, you know, I think that she's toast. I don't see how she gets the nomination at all.
Let me just say one other thing about the hearing last week about the child separation. Commander White, who was testifying in front of the committee, he mentioned something called bed capacity modeling. Bed capacity modeling. Everybody should walk that into their brain. Bed capacity modeling. That is a way of projecting how many beds, and you were talking about 48,000, 50,000 beds needed. Bed capacity modeling. Is bed capacity modeling being shared with investors? Because these are private corporations. Is bed capacity modeling, the information, the government-formed bed capacity modeling, being shared with private corporations? Because that would be a way that they could move assets around to maximize profit.
Yeah, and it seems like it is. There's a fascinating piece on this whole thing by Greg Sargent on the front page of the Washington Post today. It's titled, "Raging Over a Looming Loss on His Wall, Trump Rolls Out More Lies." And that it speaks specifically to this bed issue. I've only read half the article, and I want, so tomorrow I'm going to have to talk about it tomorrow because I just can't do this while I'm on the air. But there's but I think that's a big piece of it. Scott, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Joy in Thompsonville, Illinois. Hey, Joy. Joy, who's on your list?
Oh, of course, I like Bernie, and I like Nina Turner. She has a passionate voice, and I believe the African American people will hear her voice and they'll be on board.
Yeah.
And I don't think Kamala Harris would be a good candidate because I believe she's corporate. Her record in California as a prosecutor was not so great. She incarcerated a lot of African Americans and gave them long sentences, I think, to appear tough. Because sometimes as a woman, people don't think you're tough enough. And I just didn't like her credentials. And I really believe what that man said. We got to look at policies, not personalities. And Bernie is the real McCoy. He came to us first and gave us inspiration. He was the first one that had these wonderful policies, and then the other Democrats jumped on board. So I don't want a copycat. I want the real thing.
Yeah. Or is Bernie going to play the role of Moses, the guy who's going to take you to the promised land, but he's not going to walk over the line himself?
Well, that's fine. And if that's his decision, I will probably support Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. Joy, thank you. Chris in Capitola, California. Hey, Chris, your thoughts?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to all your callers and all that talk about personality and all that stuff. And because I am in California, I voted for Kamala Harris to have the job she has now, but I won't vote for her for president because she's just nothing but tough. I'm tough. Who cares? We need a president with heart. And everybody coming up with this, why don't they just say, hey, I got the same plan as Bernie Sanders has? I mean, what I'm worried about, Tom, my question for you is, do you really think there's a chance we're going to get a replay of 2016? They're going to throw Bernie under the bus again?
Yeah, in all probability. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Actually, I think it's going to be a lot harder to do because, in 2016, it was really quite different because 2016 was supposed to be a coronation. The Clintons and their network of people, the power network and the donor network, they had all gotten together and basically taken over the Democratic Party. They had what's her name down in Florida, shilling on their behalf. I mean, it's there have been books written about this, including one by Donna Brazil in which she apologized to Bernie in her book, for the way that they rigged the election. So, I get all that. But I'm not, Bernie, I think, would make a fine president. I am concerned that he would be 80 years old the day that he's sworn in. I would want to pay very careful attention to how he's doing these days. But, certainly throughout his 70s, Bernie has been the Energizer Bunny. Chris, thanks a lot for the call. Rich in Cedro Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, your thoughts?
Hey, I'm still hanging with, for sure, electability. Sherrod Brown, he's going to bring the Midwest. He's going to bring the Rust Belt. He can talk to the coal country, and he's going to supercharge the unions. And I don't care what he's saying right now about single payer. If a progressive Congress puts single payer on his desk, I think he's going to sign it.
Of
you
course.
can ask him next time you talk to him, but I think he would go ahead and sign that. If he runs on that, that way it's not so scary to the moderates.
Yeah.
But
I want to talk about what the punditry is doing right now. Is they're setting up the horse race. They're looking for the best rating, what's going to get the best sparks, and they're throwing it out there. It's blatant. They're talking about it. Who's going to be?
And they won't talk about policy. I mean, that's the big thing, Rich. And I'm so gratified that we've been able to have a conversation here for 2.5 hours about who's running, and the main focus of it has always been on policy. Rather than horse race. It seems to me at this point in time, and now this could change, in a day or in a week, and it certainly will change in a few months. But it looks to me right now like the strongest contenders for president are Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, and the strongest contenders for vice president are probably Beto O'Rourke and Sherrod Brown. But God only knows. I mean, things can change so fast in this business, and we'll see where it goes. Rich, thanks for the call. Myrna in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Hey, Myrna, your thoughts?
Hey, Rich. I think Tulsi Gabbard would be a great president. She's like Bernie, most like Bernie other than Bernie.
She was an early supporter of Bernie, just like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They were both organizers for Bernie.
She resigned from the DNC, co-chair of DNC, to support Bernie because she wasn't going to put up with the crap that the DNC was trying to pull.
Yep.
And she's against these regime change wars, and we really need to stay out of Venezuela. We didn't need to get into Libya and Syria and all those other countries.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Out of there. Yeah, and I think she has really good policy.
Yep. We'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes, Myrna. Thank you for the call. Victoria in Scottsdale, Arizona. Hey, Victoria.
Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for taking my call and for all your good work.
Sure.
I want to weigh in on as Bernie as a presidential candidate, and I know, to address the concern that Bernie's getting up there in years, I would, and this is wishful thinking, this is my wish list, for vice presidential candidate, I'd want Elizabeth Warren. And hopefully that, she then would help usher her in when Bernie does either, hopefully fill out his 8-year stint as president, and she would be experienced and step right in, continue those policies, and maybe with AOC as her vice presidential.
That would be a hoot. That would be the most solid all progressive ticket. Whether it can be pulled off or not, that's going to be the challenge. And there's a bunch of other good candidates, and also I'm not ruling, and Victoria, thank you for the call, I'm not ruling out the possibility of essentially redemption for anybody. In other words, somebody who came up in kind of a corporate mode because they were from a big state and they needed big money, saying, okay, it's a new era, it's a new time, I'm changing my spots here, I'm going to change how we do this. I'm okay with that.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's 46 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program, exposing the con in conservative. And welcome back. Raul in El Paso, Texas. Hey, Raul, you've got Trump coming to your town today. How's the city taking it?
Well, we're going to see. Certainly the city's leaders have, said that the stats or the statements that Donald Trump made are false. The number of illegal crossings has dropped steadily over the last 15 to 20 years. It had a little spike, but overall it's way down. It's not a crisis. I feel safe in my community. I'm going to go out there today and voice my protest for the president. I was telling your call screener that I've got an idea how we could solve this immigration problem. And I grew up here in the border. My father managed a large retail business in Juarez all his married life, even though we lived here in El Paso.
So he ran a business in Mexico, and you went back and commuted, basically.
Yes, sir, every day. And through my lifetime, I met all his business friends and associates, entrepreneurs, business owners, very proud people, Mexican males. The minute Donald Trump said that Mexico was going to pay for the wall, I knew he was a lying xenophobe.
Yeah.
But in any case, throughout the time that I've lived here, and I'm 68 years old, businesses on this side have big farms, food processing plants, the leisure industry, not so much here, but in other parts of the country, as you know, have a long history of hiring illegal workers. And I've been in business for myself. I've been a small businessman. I know that it doesn't take a whole lot to really check out somebody's credentials and resume and, background checks. So these people know what they're doing. And so if we were really serious about solving this problem, we'd have to deal with a supply of cheap labor, from the push of Mexico's poverty to the demand for cheap labor over here and the pull of the jobs that these greedy capitalist pigs take advantage of these economic refugees and have been for generations. And this is not.
This goes back to 1986, Raul, after Ronald Reagan did his amnesty and his comprehensive immigration reform, and there were some very good pieces to that. He stopped enforcing the law against hiring people who are not citizens. He just stopped enforcing it in order to break the backs of unions, and it worked.
Right. It absolutely would. So if we were serious, they'd ramp up their efforts in audits and regular and routine audits of these employers. And when they caught these people, so that we don't devastate these industries, this is my idea, and we don't hurt these people, we make the employers who broke the law pay for all the work and all the processing and paperwork to get these people legal work permits. They can stay on the job. And then we're going to have a really tough national ID, so that from there on out, they can't hire anybody else who's not here legally, and they'll have all the means, high-tech means, to verify that these people are here legally. And as you know, Tom, what would happen, they'd have to raise wages eventually.
Yep. And you know which company should be hit with this first, Raul? The Trump Bedminster, New Jersey golf course that the majority of its permanent long-term staff were actually all from one little town in Costa Rica. And they just fired 18 people because they knew that the Washington Post or somebody was looking into it. I mean,
yeah, that's another industry.
If we're going to send white wealthy employers to jail, let's start with Donald Trump and his crime family.
You got that. Here in El Paso, the developers, housing builders have used illegal labor to build the houses here in El Paso forever. And that's one of the reasons we've had affordable housing here for a long time, because it's built by illegal.
Cheap labor. Yeah, and that's, I mean, again, this is how Reagan broke the backs of the unions in the construction trade and in the meatpacking industry, was by stopping his enforcement of that law. Raul, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Just did a rant about how we have actually passed a major climate change tipping point that we can't walk back from. We can't stop it. This is coming now. It is unstoppable. This first step of it, which has to do with, the destruction of major cities in the United States and all around the world. You can check this out over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, or for people who support us on YouTube as well, you can see this. Get over to patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN to check this out. We're talking about how prior to a couple of years ago, and this is how, tipping points, you can only see them in the rearview mirror. Prior to a couple of years ago, in the winter, the Arctic and Greenland, the Antarctic and Greenland, would recover some of their ice. Now they're not even doing that. It's just pausing. The melting is just pausing. That's that tipping point. And the consequences of this are going to be terrible. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and
Jeff in Minneapolis, listening to AM 950. Hey, Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I drove an hour through a blizzard to get to see Amy make her announcement, and I think Amy Klobuchar is going to be a dark horse. The proximity to Iowa, the early caucuses, I just think she's going to be a really good candidate and give everybody else a run for their money.
Yeah. Now, somebody who called earlier kind of said, well, they didn't think she was all that progressive. I've always thought she was very progressive. I attended a fundraiser at her home back, a decade or thereabouts ago, I guess when she was first running for the Senate. And, met her daughter, met a bunch of people who were working with her and for her. And it seemed like a really genuinely progressive crowd. It was certainly a hell of a progressive speech she gave. What, as a Minnesotan, what's your sense of her? politically?
Oh, my sense of her is that she works across the aisle, which is a bad word lately, but I think she works across the aisle enough she can get things done.
Mm-hmm.
She seems genuine, that she's really interested in helping the average people, the average person, and she comes from union and school teacher roots. I think she's just a really good candidate.
Great. Okay, Jeff, thanks for filling us in. Johnny in Lamarck, Texas. Hey, Johnny, what's up?
Hey, my battery's about to go, so in less than 60 seconds, I'll give you my candidates.
Okay.
In the definitely not category, Joe Biden, Clinton, and Kristen Gillibrand. In the needs work, not ready until 2024 category is Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke. In the maybe category, assuming their voting record is solid progressive, would fall Macy Hirano, Sheldon Whitehouse, Sherrod Brown, and somebody else whose name I cannot remember.
I think outside of Sherrod Brown, none of the rest of them are planning on running.
I know, but I'm giving you my people that I would vote for if they were to run.
Keep going.
And then my final, definitely yes category would be, of course, Bernie Sanders, Alan Grayson, Nina Turner, Cynthia McKinney, and I'd like to see the vice president, either Elizabeth Warren or Stacey Abrams. They would be very good for that.
Yeah. And Stacey Abrams for vice president. That's a solid one, too. Johnny, thank you for the call. Karen in Winter Haven, Florida. Hey, Karen, your thoughts?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to throw out a couple of names nobody's mentioned. I like Governor Gavin Newsom out of California, and I also like Governor Jay Inslee out of the state of Washington, even though I'm down here in Florida.
Now, Gavin Newsom has not evidenced any, or evinced, or however you say that word, hasn't shown any indication that he wants to run for president, although I would bet 4 years from now, or even 8 years from now, because he's a young guy, that's going to be high on his list. The Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington State, has basically announced his candidacy. He's not getting much buzz. We should try and get Jay Inslee on the program. He's, Louise and I had dinner with him years ago. He seems like a very decent guy, and he's running on a Green New Deal, or I'm not sure it's specifically the Green New Deal, but he's running on the environment, which is a huge issue. I mean, it's a huge issue here in the Pacific Northwest, but we're talking about, at the end of the day, the survival of the human race.
Well, that's why I also wanted to suggest that we combine our search for Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, because I will tell you that the effects of climate change on our health is going to be so tremendous. Those of us here in Florida are already getting a taste of it, in that many of us who never had allergies before in the past now have them. And it's something that the CDC was down here at a dinner with the Physicians for Social Responsibility, and they warned us about. They're specialists in climate change and the environment, if they're still around during Trump, but this was during Obama's time. And they said that they were telling the Florida doctors, first of all, get your hospitals off the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, you're going to see patients that have never had allergies before. They're going to get them because when they dropped all that core exit and junk into the Gulf, it blew right across the state of Florida because we're flat.
Yeah.
And both my little sister and my mother and I all have them now. We never had them before. And the other thing, too, surviving Hurricane Irma, I will predict that because of the strength of the hurricanes, Florida will be uninhabitable in the future.
Wow. Okay.
Because Irma covered the whole state.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But Karen, I think that the environment is a huge issue. And Jay Inslee is doing a great job of talking about it, as are all the other candidates. Thanks so much for being with us today. What a fascinating day. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the same. And we'll see where Trump's, bed thing is going and whether the Democrats are going to effectively fight back. Check out Greg Sargent's piece in the Washington Post today. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.